Aloha. Will the Committee on Budget please come to order? It's 9:04 a.m. I'd like to welcome committee members Kia Aina and Wire, as well as Council Chair Tommy Waters, Council Member Val Okimoto. Committee Member Radiant Cordero is excused for this meeting. For this meeting, members, I'd like to turn it over to my Vice Chair, Scott Nishimoto, to run the briefings on the 4 first responder departments. We make a good team, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to share a little bit of the load and dive into really interesting questions about these 4 departments. So I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Chair to run this portion of the meeting with the 4 first responder departments.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, let's start out with our fun announcements. Pursuant to Section 92-3.7 HRS, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda in 2 ways, remotely and in person in the council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when the agenda item is taken up. As both English and Hawaiian are official languages of the state of Hawaii, pursuant to Article 15, Section 4 of the Hawaii State Constitution and Section 1-13 of the Hawaii Revised Statute, members of the public may testify in either language. For oral testimonies offered in Olelo, Hawaii, additional time as may be necessary will be allowed for the testifier to provide an English translation to their testimony. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to 1 minute per presentation per each item. All persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference will be called upon first. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. I will then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to offer testimony. Please utilize the raised hand feature in Zoom to be called on. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips. Video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you are watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. When the timer on screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. For those calling in on the accessible phone extension, I will call your name in order you are registered to speak. Please begin by stating your name. After I go through the list, I will ask if there is anyone on the accessible phone extension who would like to testify. Once all remote testifiers have testified, I will proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to speak following the oral testimony of the registered speakers. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I will first call for objections. If there are any, I will call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside the council chamber in accordance to HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will be automatically recessed if we lose audiovisual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. Cell phones, as a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. Disclosure of statement of interest or disclosure of interest statements. Members, the following disclosure of interest statements were filed with the city clerk's office after the agenda was posted. Oh, okay, there's no disclosure of interest statements. Members, for agenda number 1, we will not be hearing from the Department of Parks and Recreations today because the director of the department is not feeling well. The department will present its briefing at the Special Budget Committee meeting on Friday, March 14th, 2025, which starts at 10 a.m. However, we will hear testimony on that matter, if any, when testimony is called. Interested parties may also testify in that matter on Friday. Okay, let's first go to remote testimony. Are there any remote testifiers registered?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, let's go to in-person testimony. Anyone here wanting to testify in person? Okay, see none. Let's start with the Emergency Services Department. Director Ireland.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair members. James Ireland, Director Designee for the Department of Honolulu Emergency Services Department. This will be a highlight of our budget proposal for 2026. It will be a little skewed from our previous budgets because ocean safety for the first time in more than 20 years will not be part of our emergency services budget. In the administration, we have a request for a 3.5% increase. In the Emergency Medical Services Division, a 4.6% increase, and the Health Services Branch, a 5.4% increase. As next slide, as an overview, in the administration, we're requesting an additional $257,000 for a 3.5% increase. In EMS, approximately $1.8 million increase, or 4.6%, and the Health Services Branch, $75,000, or a 5.4% increase. And again, ocean safety will be a different presentation this year with their department. Next slide. Budget highlights, we have in the budget a request of one additional 12-hour ambulance unit, and we also have a little over $3 million budgeted for ambulance fleet remounts to replenish the EMS ambulance fleet. And what we learned is a brand new ambulance is approaching $500,000 each, but we can do what's called a remount for about half of that price. And what a remount does is take an existing ambulance box and remount that on a brand new chassis with a refurbishment of the box. We did that in our budget last year. We had 6 brand new ambulances, which are being completed actually this month, and we were able to put 12 remounted ambulances in our budget for last year. And we're expecting the first 8 of those 12 also to be finished this month for a total of 18 new ambulances from last year's budget. And in this year's budget, we're proposing another 11 remounts. Because we have about 50 ambulances in total in our fleet, remounting for the next few budget cycles makes a lot more fiscal sense and will get us actually new chassis on the road and a lot faster and more economical than brand new ambulances. Next slide. Breakdown by activity. Administration is 15%, EMS is 82%, and health services is 3% of our budget. And then by category, 77% is salaries, 17% is current expense, and 6% is equipment. Next slide. In the administration, we're proposing a $119,000, 2.3% increase in salaries, $98,000 in current expense, and $40,000 in equipment for an overall increase in 3.5%. The administration houses our core program, medical direction, PIO, and all the administrative functions of the department with finance, which brings me to something I forgot to mention in the beginning. I just want to thank Leanne, CJ, and Sam in our admin staff for helping prepare this binder and for our presentation today. So thanks, you guys. Moving on to the next slide, emergency medical services. In salaries, we're requesting approximately $1.7 million increase, or 5.7%. Current expense, an additional $60,000, or 1%, and equipment, an additional $25,000, or a little less than 1% increase. And again, that's mostly for the ambulance remounts. In the health services branch, we're requesting an overall 5.4% increase to cover mostly salaries, and we're adding a physician position part-time into the health services branch to help with the priorities in hiring and return to work and annual physicals, particularly for our heavy truck and equipment operators and first responder colleagues. Vacancies, as of the snapshot, we had 40 vacancies. We currently have about 55 people in the pipeline to be hired. 20 are starting actually this month, and another approximately 30 to 35 sometime between now and July 1st. Now that actually exceeds our vacancy count, so we may have to hire some of them in contracts if we run out of actual positions, but we've been very fortunate with our own internal EMS academy, as well as hiring through KCC and other means to fill our ranks. Next slide. Overtime. In administration, we're requesting $57,000 for overtime. In emergency medical services, $5.8 million, and in health services, $23,000. I will note that health services does do, in collaboration with the Honolulu Police Department, the blood draws for people who are suspected of driving while impaired, and that requires them to go out at night and on the weekends to do those blood draws. We also do the laboratory testing for all the DUI blood tests for the entire state, and so although that's generally done on regular work time, potentially that also does have some overtime involved. Revenue sources. Again, we get the $3.5 million a year based on the car registration fees from the state of Hawaii. We have estimated revenue from billing, again for next year, approximately $42 million for an estimated $45.5 million. We do expect an increase in call volume, so potentially this could be higher. Also, the state rate for billing increases by approximately 10% per year, but because Medicare and Medicaid only will pay a fixed amount no matter how much we charge, and we also have contracts with certain private insurers, that will not necessarily result in 10% more revenue. It will result in more revenue, but not 10%. So because of that, we estimate the collections to be approximately $45.5 million for 2026. Next slide. In our CIP budget, we have the renovation of the Kahuku ambulance facility, which is taking that from approximately a 900 square foot facility to a greater than 3,000 square foot facility with 2 bays, which will allow added capacity and expansion on the North Shore. And also our Waipio ambulance training facility, which will include our, not only for training, but our backup dispatch center, and then state-of-the-art simulation labs like they have at the medical school, as well as driver simulation labs for our training. The Waipio ambulance unit, as well as our anticipated move to the blood bank for our headquarters, will allow us to get out of most, if not all, of our leases at the airport complex, which is approximately like $700,000 a year. So we look forward to both of those projects within our CIP budget. That's all I have for this presentation, but available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Members, we'll start with questions on my right, your left. Any questions? Chair Waters. Okay. Member Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair, or Vice Chair. Good morning. I had a couple of questions, and I've asked this I asked this yesterday because I did notice in yours as well as some other departments that there's a big discrepancy between salaries going from 2024 to 2025, and I know we're looking at 25 to 26, but with ocean safety being removed, why is it that the salaries in the administration went from 2.9 million to then 5.3 million, now asking for 5.4 million? I was just curious.
So in admin from 2.4 to, excuse me.
2.9. In 2024, it was 2.9. And then ocean safety got removed, but in 2025, the request was to 5.3, which was approved or appropriate. And then in this year, it's now 5.4. So I'm wondering why that is, because on the previous page, it shows that salaries, because ocean safety got removed, it should be less. The expenditure should be less. But why salaries in the administration have increased since then?
I think some of that because administration does have HGA and UPW members also. Some of that is collective bargaining for those increases. We're talking about the 119,000?
I didn't do the math, but it went from 2.9 to 5.3 and now 5.4. So that was my next question. If these estimated, are they including the collective bargaining? Have you factored that into your calculations?
I'm going to look here. Yes, we definitely generally try to factor in the collective bargaining. The other thing is we do anticipate, we're in negotiations now with the UPW for a retention program, which includes an EMS, what's called an EMS differential. And so that also is built into the budget with respect to salaries and funding that.
So the 2.9 in 2024, that was even with, I guess that was OSD, it was a different. Okay, thank you. I had a couple more questions just based on the program description on your administration page. I was curious to know what the contract FTEs are. There's 10, again, in FTE 2024, then it bumped up to 48 in 2025, and you're asking for the same. What are those contracted positions for?
When we opened CORE, it was almost purely on FRF and federal funding. And as that has diminished, we've had to transition that funding to city-funded positions. And a lot of those are contract right now, and depending on what we, as the administration and as a group, decide what the future of CORE is, that will then further transition actually into civil service positions. So that's just been a process. We didn't want to do it all in 1 year, but the plan was to go from federally funded contracts to city-funded contracts and then into city-funded civil service positions for the folks doing the homelessness work.
So the 40, well, I guess 30 net is CORE positions from 2024 to 2025?
Yes.
So what did that reflect? Before that, they were positions where in the permanent FTEs, paid for with the COVID funds?
Sorry, federally funded, and not necessarily COVID funds, but FRF and recovery, mostly federal funding, some from the state as well. But again, as that funding has kind of just dried up and we wanted to continue the program, we've transitioned those again to contracts, but then long-term, and depending what the size is for CORE, like we initially thought maybe the team should be 60 or more people, and right-sizing it maybe to 30 to 40 people might be more appropriate, especially within our budget and what the needs are. And also because the mission of CORE is enhanced by the ability to take people to different types of shelters and respites. So focusing more on that aspect, which really isn't our department, it's more DCS and the state, but trying to right-size CORE to meet the challenges of the community, but at the same time fund it long-term through civil service positions. So we're just going through that transition.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand, and thank you for being patient in my questions. If these 38 positions were federally funded, where were they allocated prior to 2025? Were those 38 positions, where were they counted? They should have been somewhere.
I think they weren't part of our budget.
They were not part of the budget at all, okay.
No.
So now they are, and you're saying there's civil service positions, they're not, is that what I heard you say, that these, right now you have them contracted, but the goal is to get them, I thought I heard you say civil service. Did I hear that wrong?
Right, so most of them, the majority of them are still contracted positions, city-funded. We're proposing city funding. A few are now civil service, but the goal is to transition most of them to civil service so people have a long-term commitment to the city and they know the funding's not going to go away. But we didn't really want to do all that in one budget cycle or 1 year. So we're kind of just slowly adding civil service positions over the next few years is the plan.
So those personnel operating under CORE, I thought that they were our city employees. They were part of EMS, just branched in a different part of it. That's not the case. They're not.
They are part of our department, and they are city employees, but they're
EMS. I thought they were one of I thought they were one of the EMTs or paramedics. That's not the case.
No, they're in their own. They're part of the administration. They're not actually in EMS. And we considered putting them with EMS and having that mix, but their mission is just so different that I think having folks who are committed to homelessness and committed to that group of patients, and also because some of them are actually HGEA employees. They're the community health workers, the social worker type positions are not in the UPW, so that wouldn't necessarily, the UPW workforce is, the EMS workforce is primarily UPW. And so we've concentrated them in the administration, but yes, I think they were all initially federally funded.
Okay, so at some point we will see these 48 positions then move up to the permanent? Is that what we would be looking at in the future?
Yes, and not necessarily, it may be less positions, it may be more. I think we're just trying to right-size core for the mission. But yes, the goal is whatever the core team becomes will be permanent civil service positions.
And about how much in salaries is that cost, is that total for the core positions? What amount in salaries are we looking at?
$2.3 million, says my deputy.
Okay, last question for this round. Really quick, the special projects funds, the 3.2 million under the administration's budget, what is that, the special? It's under special projects. It was 3.2 for fiscal year 2024, then it was 0 following. I was just wondering what that was. Is that something that, now, because I was zeroed out, but there was 3.2 million actual in 2024.
I believe that's FRF, but let me double check so we answer accurately.
Okay, thank you.
Because the other thing that's just made this a little confusing, not only for everybody, but for me, is some of the stuff when we're looking backwards is ocean safety line items. And I want to make sure, even though it's in our budget as the past expenses, I want to make sure we separate that out just for information going forward.
That'd be good, because, yeah, you have 0 in it now, so I was curious as to what was the reason for it before, and there's no need for it now. I was just wondering what that was.
And also for some of our income that got zeroed out, it was because of funding we got like from Hanama Bay or from the different state contracts for ocean safety.
Okay, thank you, Director Designate. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, any other questions? Member Wire.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And mahalo, Dr. Arlin, for being here and the work on the Kuku and the YPO facilities. I know YPO is not our district, but definitely serves our district, and then of course Kuku. I wanted to come specifically to the discussion of the ambulance units, and was just going to ask if you could run through those numbers again, because I think I caught most of it, but $500,000 I think was that for new ambulance? And then
Yeah, a little shy of $500,000 is what a new ambulance costs. We're not proposing any new ambulance purchases in this budget. We're actually proposing 11 remounts for that line item. In last year's budget, we had 6 brand new ambulances and 12 remounts for a total of 18 essentially new ambulances. And from last year's budget, the 6 new ones are being completed this month, and 8 of the 12 remounts are being completed this month. We expect delivery next month. And then for next year, we're proposing 11 remounts. And so 18 and 11, that's 29 ambulances that will be less than a year old, which will essentially rejuvenate our entire fleet. And then moving forward, we're looking at just continuing the remount program to both allow us to bring more rigs into the system, but at the same time be fiscally responsible.
Okay, so the remount is an existing, it was an ambulance before?
Right, these are ambulances we own, and they get 300,000 miles on them, and the brakes wear and the engine and all that, but the box in the back is still quite good. And so rather than just auction off the whole ambulance when its service life is done or give it to Core, what we're doing is they're removing that box, refurbishing it, maybe putting in new cushions, upgrading to LED lighting, and basically sprucing it up, and then dropping it on a brand new F-350 diesel truck chassis. So you have brand new brakes, brand new engine, essentially a brand new ambulance, but your workspace is from a previous ambulance that's been refurbished. And generally in departments on the mainland, they will remount 2 to 3 times before they will then send the ambulance off for auction. So we're just finding that we can get basically twice as many ambulances on new chassis than just buying new. And this is actually the first time this department has ever done the remounts. Now vans, which we only use, I think, 3 in the core program, our department doesn't use vans. We use what's called Type 1 or Type 3, which is a truck or basically a truck front with a box mounted on the back. The vendor we use is the same one used by Beverly Hills Fire Department, LA City Fire Department, and the Big Island Fire Department for their ambulances. So we're very comfortable with this vendor. And again, this will be our first kind of go at the remounts, and if it's successful, I think we're going to continue that in future budgets.
Okay, so how much are, just so I know going forward, to the type 1, type 2 vehicles? Is that the same, about 500, or that's a little bit less?
A type 1 ambulance is somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000, depending on the maker. The remount is approximately half of that, and
Okay.
A type 1, which is a van, can be anywhere from maybe $125,000 to $200,000. But in talking with the paramedics and the feedback from our own employees, for the emergency work that they do and the drugs they carry and the body armor and all their equipment, it's very difficult to fit in a van. It's too small. For intra-facility transfers, like the private ambulance, they use almost all vans, and maybe that's more conducive for their type of emergencies they go to. But our personnel pretty much universally told us that they really want to stay with the type 1 ambulances, the truck front.
Okay, and then just last question on this, the number of remountable vehicles left after this year was how many?
We probably have another 35.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so we have approximately 50 ambulances in the fleet, and so as long as the box is in good shape, we intend to potentially remount all 50 over the next 3 to 5 years. So really, I think it's just a much better way to go, where we can get more ambulances on the road, which will allow, number one, the fleet will be young, and then also it'll allow us for expansion.
Okay, appreciate that. Mahalo for all the work you're doing. And since everyone's here, there's all of our first responders. I know for our community in particular, they want to make sure everyone has all the tools and resources they need, because it really is a public safety issue, particularly in rural communities. And I know the community is thankful and grateful, particularly in North Shore, and then also on the Kahului Waikane side, for all the work you're doing. So just wanted to relay that I have received good feedback. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Island, first of all, I just wanted to express my support for your leadership at the department. Both yourself and your deputy have been very responsive, I feel, not only to my district, but to the residents of Oahu. So I wanted to say that. And of course, you are the mayor's representative to our Kailua Neighborhood Board. Both yourself and Shane have been very responsive to Kailua in that role. So I just wanted to say that at the outset. You and I have discussed better needs that might be necessary for the windward side, specifically at the Castle Junction corridor. It was my desire that, I know the state was interested in the Hawaii Pacific University in Kaneohe, and social services were supposed to happen there, and that's not happening, so very, very disappointed. But having said that, I understand that the Department of Land and Natural Resources is looking at that campus, and I've already talked to the chair to ensure that consideration is given for potential substation, an ambulance substation there. So I hope that she outreaches to you. My question to you is, I see the proposal for Kohuku and Waipio. I, of course, would want a substation in that Castle Junction, Maunawili area, and am likely going to be offering an amendment on the salaries front. So two things. I want to know what your opinion is about the need for that specific location. And second, do I also need to put in funds for CIP?
Thank you, Council Member, for those comments. I really also just want to thank my assistant chiefs who are all up here today, just for helping just run this department and do all the hard work for all the men and women of our whole department. Call volume is growing. There's no doubt about that. People call for more types of problems. The population is getting older. The population is growing. We only have, as you know, Waimanalo, Kailua, and Kaneohe, and one district chief to service really the whole windward side, because our next ambulance isn't up until Kahuku and then around the other way, Hawaii Kai. So what a station at Maunawili would do is, and we did look at, there is a 1 acre city lot that ENV holds that we looked at possibly taking part of that on the driveway kind of down to the golf course right there at below Kapaa Quarry Road. But building a station, the CIP for that is always a lot longer than just renting from an existing structure. And there are a lot of structures on that property at the old Hawaii Loa campus. But what a Monowili ambulance would allow us to do is, number one, it'd be the primary backup for Waimanalo, Kailua, and Kaneohe. So right there, perfectly centered to go 3 directions. But the other thing is we do know that sometimes our town calls overwhelm the town ambulances, and occasionally Kailua and Kaneohe actually have to come to town. So having Monowili right at Castle Junction be a quick trip over Pali, up to H3 to Aiea. So that could be technically like a floater ambulance. So not only would it serve that community, but could it really go to any hot spot from Aiea to maybe even Kaimuki to potentially help in all directions. So I do believe that that would be good for the community, and that's a good location. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and as we move forward in the budgetary process, I will be looking for the administration's support of my proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chair.
Thank you. I had a few questions on the revenue side. I noticed that there's that the Health Services Division does a number of programs. Do we get revenues from that, or is it fully internal for city departments? How does that work?
And I apologize for leaving some data out, but we do get some revenue for services that are done for outside the city. And Carla, maybe you could come up and just talk about our grants, or Ian about, yeah, okay.
Budget Chair, thank you again for the question. Again, Ian Santee, Deputy Director, Honolulu Emergency Services Department. In response to your question, specifically, we have a MOA with the State of Hawaii's Department of Corrections that we are currently working with, where we do physicals for them, and we do get some revenue coming in for them to supplement the physicals that we're doing for them also. We also do work with our state alcohol program, and we do have some revenue from them that helps support staffing when Health Services is doing their blood and alcohol testing.
Okay, thank you. Is that reflected in the revenue summary for this year?
No, it's not. We provide a report, but I don't believe it's inside this this one for this year, because when we get the revenue, it's sent in as a limited purpose money funds use notification to council for the state one.
Okay. But if you know that this money's coming in, it would be helpful for us to anticipate that. Okay. Speaking of revenues, I also note that in FY25, it was estimated that there'd be $1.3 million from the State Department of Land and Natural Resources. What is that for?
That, I believe, is a contract for ocean safety services for guard services at state beach parks.
I see. Okay, so then that would imply that for next year, it would likely be in the Ocean Safety Department revenue?
Correct.
Okay, great. Speaking of revenues, I note that in FY 2024, it was estimated that about $2 million of grants had lapsed. What's the story behind that? Are there issues in receiving these funds? This was an estimate done by Office of Council Services. We can put that in writing.
I'll get back to you on that, because I'm not sure. I know we have some federal money that has yet to be encumbered. There was a $9 million HUD, congressionally directed funds. And again, some of that now is questionable because of the changes in Washington. But as far as I know, we encumbered everything that was owed to us, but I will definitely get back to you formally on that.
Yeah, it may be that it was done a different way and not reflected in that report. And then last question with regard to CORE, and I know that in some of the previous answers you alluded to CORE. Are there any plans to expand the service boundaries for CORE?
Currently, we are going island-wide, but not on a daily basis. But we definitely want enhanced presence in West Oahu. We have been going out there, but I think in the new fiscal year, we're going to plan a permanent base somewhere west of Pearl Ridge, whether it's in Waipahu or further west, I don't know yet. But we are looking at a permanent presence out there for CORE.
Okay, and then for the to execute on those plans, or rather to develop those plans, do you need money to do that, or is that just an internal exercise at this point?
I think what we have in the budget will cover that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Tupola.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. Aloha. Thank you for being here, Director Designate. First question I had was about the administration. So I do believe last year our administration numbers went from 10 to 48, and I'm talking about the contract FTE, and it kind of capped out at 79. So this is, again, with you guys not having ocean safety, I would have imagined this number to come down, but it's quite a bit up. So I just wanted to ask, like, from last year where we were at 30 admin positions, now we're budgeting about 78. Can you share with us the need of why we have much more contract admin positions? So we went from 10 in FY 2024 to 48 being appropriated contract FTE for admin program positions.
I think that's all core.
Yeah, Councilmember, again, as Dr. Island started earlier, FY24, as Councilmember Okimoto questioned, that's when we ended the transition of the federal funding for core and increased it by the 38 positions. So currently this year's budget, FY25, the additional 38 positions is to support of core transitioning from the federal money into contract positions and continuing on further.
Is there a reason why core is in the administrative budget and not in emergency medical services?
It was just the way that we organized it when they came in, because, you know, really when core first came in, it was federally funded. We weren't sure if they had staying power, how well they were going to do. But what we're anticipating is probably in the next 3 months, we're actually going to propose a reorganization for the department, especially now. So the first reorganization we did was to get ocean safety on their own, get some positions with them and allow them to become their own department. But now we need to reorganize the rest of what's left of our department and put people in the proper places. And whether
Understood.
So that's coming, but it's probably going to be in the next 3 to 6 months.
Understood. I did know that those positions transferred from the federal funds. I just didn't know it was put in the administrative positions, but thank you.
Yeah, it was nice when they paid for them.
I bet it was. The next question I had was, last year we had $568,000 budgeted under administration for special projects fund, and then this year we have $3.2 million listed for administration, source of funds, the special projects fund. The $3.2 million is for what exactly?
I'm gonna have to look at that.
No problem. It's just under the administrative page. I'm just comparing it from last year to this year to see the discrepancy, and that one was kind of big because we only had about $500,000, now it's 3.2. Is there some special project that's happening we should know about, or that this was attributed towards?
Talking about the line where it went from 3 million to 0?
Yeah, so was there a 3 million that was budgeted and then we didn't use it, and then?
I think that was ocean safety.
Oh, so that's what the special fund was?
Correct.
Special fund under, see, because last year we did have numbers listed, but it wasn't for ocean safety. So you're telling me that the special projects fund had 3 million for ocean safety special projects? Because that wasn't actually listed last year either. So you're just saying that somehow last year it was a special project fund for them.
I'll get back to you formally, but I believe it was ocean safety, but we'll transmit something formally to address that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, no problem. My next question was, I believe as of February 1st last year, you had 25 vacancies. Now we're at about 40 vacancies. So I know you said you're filling at about 18 by July, or the slide said 18 by July, and I think another 20 by next year. Can you maybe share with us, because I think we have, well, I feel like we have more core members, but then more vacancies. So can you explain kind of how what you're attributing the doubling of vacancies to, and kind of how you're combating that?
I want to say, I think our snapshot last year was 57 vacancies.
It was. I looked at the spreadsheet of vacancies for last year. It didn't. But hey, if you said you have 57, then maybe we're down.
We are. So we went from 57 on the snapshot and down to 40 on the snapshot now. But we have a list for supervisors, and so I think 6 or 7 supervisor positions will be filled, and so there'll be kind of a trickle in kind of as those positions vacate. But we do have, I think, 20 people starting this month. I know the paper says 18, but it's actually 20. And we have about 35 in the queue to start in our academy and in dispatch before or at right around July 1st. So we'll actually have more people than we have vacancies. So some of those we may actually have to hire on contract and just make it work. But we are down in the snapshot this year. Not as low as I want it, but we're down.
Because you've been hovering around 310, 311 for emergency medical services FTE positions. So you're saying that with those filling that you would bump that number up in the emergency medical services FTE?
Right. So right now in EMS, in our proposed budget, we're asking for 6 additional positions for an ambulance.
Is that the one on emergency medical services for 7 positions? Is that the second page?
Right. So 6 will be on an ambulance, and 1 will be in our training bureau.
Oh, okay. Is the 6th the one that you have listed under contract FTE? I see it.
No, contract will be, I think most of our contracts are with CORE. EMS is the only time we'll hire on contract in EMS is generally if we don't have a immediate vacant position or if they're coming in part-time.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can reconcile that because I think on the binder we were given it says 7. My next question was you listed $4.2 million for overtime. I can't find the number from last year, but is that about around the same range you've been at every year for overtime, the $4.2 million?
Budgeted, yes. Actual, I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, so you're saying that 4.2 million was budgeted, but you're not sure if you actually used all of that last year.
Oh, I'm sure we used it all. I'm sure we went over, but as far as how much over, I'm going to have to get back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, it would be good to know the overtime numbers. I mean, for most of our first responder departments, like the overtime numbers are directly related to vacancies, right? Because people are trying to cover. So I just wanted to see where you guys are hovering at with actual overtime that was paid.
The other thing is because our schedule does 4 12-hour shifts every other week, they have 8 hours of built-in overtime half the time. So that's part of it. And then there's also, of course, the holiday overtime because they don't get off.
Understood. I just wanted to kind of track that for burnout. Whenever there's really high overtime, that means that lots of people are covering shifts and they may face burnout. On your slides, you said you're about $42 million for billing reimbursement. Is that about where we need to be at, or you think we could do more billing recovery there?
So there's a few avenues of approach on that. One is we're constantly re-engaging with our personnel on making sure they get like the insurance card, especially if people don't live here, contact information, so we capture everything that's owed to us.
Understood.
But
do you think it could be higher, or you think it's about where we should be?
I would like it to be higher. The other thing is call volume goes up every year, so that will increase. And then the state increases the ambulance rate by 10% every year, so that will increase, not Medicare, Medicaid, but potentially other insurers. And then lastly, in the coming months, we'll be discussing other ways to bill for things we're not billing for now, and we'll come before council with that proposal. But it's essentially if we treat somebody, give them medications, for instance, but they don't go to the hospital. Right now, we're not billing for that, and it is allowed under Medicare, so we're looking at that.
Good. Good to know. Thank you. Lastly, I didn't receive notification that you requested from Ko'olina to do like a substation there, and I didn't see anything proposed in this particular budget for that. Is that something that you're looking to expand there? I know on the map it listed we have one in Nanakuli, one in Makakilo. We
have identified sites all over in every council district where we would like to have additional resources. And right now we have a paramedic in a rapid response SUV based in Kapolei, but because of the call volume in Honokaihale, in Nanakuli, and actually on the property at Ko'olina, we thought perhaps putting that SUV at Ko'olina might provide better response times for the area overall. So it's relocating an asset that's on West Oahu. Oh, I see. It's in Kapolei. You're trying to see if it's better placed in Ko'olina. Understood. Last statement, not a question. I do appreciate the tour of the respite center, and it's good for me to see firsthand. Of course, I've been working with CORE on and off in various things, and so I'm still just
trying to really understand. And I think what you said was to right-size core. I am concerned that we don't expand it farther unless we have places, because like without the respite center, I don't know, because I appreciate you guys bringing a guy from Waianae all the way out to Kalihi to take care of him, but without the places we, within our communities, like really you guys are sending like 5 or 6 paramedics to get one guy, and I just don't know if that's a good use of resources until I can get something out of my district where we can actually service them, help them, connect them back to family and not have to transport so far. But those are just concerns of mine. I, of course, appreciate what they're doing. I'm just trying to realize that these are medical experts that are spending much of their time on the road for one person. I just don't want us to be using resources in a way that's not as effective. And if there is a community solution that's better suited to kind of integrate things so that we can kind of alleviate the pressure but achieve the same goal, that would be my suggestion. So thank you.
Totally agree. And in my experience, limited experience on west side of Oahu, sewers and some of the encampments there, even out as far as Makaha, many of those folks, as you know, are born and raised in that community and want their respite in that community. So I know I've been talking with our colleagues in community services about that, as well as you and your staff, and I think that is a priority to get a respite in West Oahu to help balance for the folks who are out there and need the help.
Understood. I'm working towards that goal as well. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Second round, or I guess Chair Waters, first round.
I could be the start of the second round.
Whatever you want.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Hey, do you know how much your department has lapsed this last year? Excluding ocean safety. You spent all the money we appropriated.
I'll double check, but if we lapsed anything, it wasn't much, but I'll double check.
Okay, yeah, that'd be helpful. What I'm hearing you say is you have currently snapshot of 40 vacancies. 20 are going to be filled like immediately.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And then the other 20 you think are going to be filled soon thereafter. They're about to go into training.
We have an academy starting, I believe, July 1st with about 25 slots. We also have new dispatchers coming in. So the 20 starting this month, the 25 in the academy, plus the dispatchers, it's more than 50 people coming in. Now, we know some will come in and this isn't for them. And, unfortunately, I'm not expecting 50 to stay. But we are bringing 50 into the department before July.
So you think you'll have 0 vacancies? That'd be pretty amazing.
That's the dream. But, I mean, realistically, when I come before you, if I'm here in a year, if it's single digits, I'd be really happy.
Okay. Aside from CORE being funded by SLRF, do you have any other positions or programs that are funded by the federal government?
I don't think we do, no.
Fantastic. I like the idea of remounts. It sounds like you send these ambulances to the mainland. That's where the remount occurs.
So the good news on that is that, yes, there's a company that's south of Washington where we buy the ambulances from. But because our department and the Big Island Fire Department buy the ambulances from the same vendor, and I believe the Big Island Fire Department is also looking at this option, they have discussed putting a small facility on Oahu to take care of their Hawaii customers. So that would actually save us even more money because it's, to send the ambulance there and back is additional cost and expense. So right now we're sending them to Washington, but if they would do it here locally, it'd be even better.
Fantastic. We did put money in the budget last year for new ambulances. Were you able to obtain the new ambulances?
They will be finished literally like in 1 to 2 weeks, and we expect delivery in April, and we expect them to be in service, licensing and registration the first week in May. 6 ambulances, along with the first 8 remounts.
Fantastic. And I guess my concern is you're asking for an additional $3 million for ambulance remounts. And how many ambulances do you anticipate we can remount for $3 million?
Approximately 11.
11, fantastic. We're hearing a lot about tariffs on Mexico and Canada, where apparently a lot of automaking occurs. Do you think that's going to affect the remounts that we're talking about?
We generally use Ford F-350 or F-450 trucks I'm not sure where all those are made. I'm assuming a lot in the United States, but they may be made in Mexico, which if there is a tariff, that would impact us for sure.
Yeah, let us know. Hey, notice you have is it true you have $400,000 for meals?
So as part of
Can
the
you
collective
explain that?
bargaining contract, people on the 12-hour shifts get one meal per shift, and they don't actually get the meal. They get I think it's $10 for that. Yes.
Oh, I see. And then at some point during the shift, they go and pick up a meal?
They do, or they bring their lunch, yes.
I see. Okay. Office rent for the airport is $1.1 million.
Is that what it is now? Yeah, it is. And that's why we're eagerly awaiting our transfer to the blood bank, which we purchased last year, and for the administration and possibly one ambulance that's based at the airport. And then our training and backup dispatch, which is currently at the airport, moving that to the YPO facility that's in our CIP budget.
I see. And when is the blood bank site going to be finished?
You know, it's an ongoing process because part of them turning it over is them moving to Kapolei into their new facility, maybe in the next year, but we're also going to do some renovations there and make it more appropriate for our use with the ambulance and for administration. So there may be a transition time where we need to do some construction.
So the blood bank is still occupying that spot? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you need the entire 1.1 million. You won't be
Yes.
out. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there money in the budget to refurbish the current blood bank site to be used for EMS?
We put, I think, $500,000 in our DFM? No? Yeah, internally we have that $500,000 to do some refurb, not major, but to reconfigurate.
Oh, where would we find that $500,000? $500,000?
It's just money internally that we would work with the Department of Facility Maintenance. We don't have CIP money in the budget for that right now.
But you're saying internally in EMS's budget, you have $500,000?
No, not 500,000. It's just money that we use for normal renovations for our facilities.
Okay. Where does that come from?
Probably for that blood bank, it would be in the next budget, because by the time we acquire, it's going to be during this the upcoming budget. We'd probably have to put money in the following year's budget for the renovations.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's, at no time soon, you're going to be moving into this spot, is what you're saying.
Ideally, in this next fiscal year, we might be able to partially move, but I don't think we'll be able to move everybody. And then the other thing too is we're also utilizing the Delight Bakery site, which is ultimately going to be for affordable housing. But the fire department had used it 2 years ago and done some modifications there to make it more of like a station when they were doing refurbishment. So that site could be part of our plans in transition to get out of the airport before we go over to the blood bank. But we are going to need that entire rent for the airport next year.
Okay, I guess that's what I'm getting at. If we can cockroach part of that 1.1 million, if you're going to be moving in early, but it doesn't sound like it. Lastly, how much would it cost to move to a 3-shift schedule similar to HFD?
So the issue with that is each employee would work another roughly 800 hours a year. There'd be a fatigue factor because of the amount of calls they run, and they would not necessarily get enough rest at night because they're just running too many calls. And then the other issue is in federal law, the fire department, I think, only has to pay overtime after, I think it's 50 or 52 hours or something, where in EMS, it's over 40 hours. So if they're working 3 24-hour shifts a week as an EMS employee, then we'd have to pay the overtime beyond 40 hours. We have looked at those models. Right now, our Waimanalo station, our Kahuku station, and maybe our Wailua station are the only 3 that could potentially do that just because of the call volume. But instead of 8 people needing to be stationed in an ambulance on a 3-shift schedule, a 24-hour schedule, we would only need 6 people to be scheduled at that ambulance rather than 8. So you're trading less people, but everybody's getting more hours. So I think the main barrier to that isn't necessarily the cost, but it's the fatigue factor. If at some point we were part of the fire department and they were in the fire union and it was a fire-based ambulance and it had slow enough call volume, then it would be perhaps more attractive at other stations as well. But as long as the call volume exceeds a certain amount, it's probably, I would say, just unsafe to keep people running that much.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other burning questions? Okay, Member Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. It's a follow-up questions, and I know that Committee Chair Santos have asked about revenue. I want to kind of go in that direction right now. If you could explain why in your budget, the actual FY24 revenue from the state was 20 million when it was supposed to be 7.9 million according to Act 208. And the Act, it says 7.9 million, but we have it recorded as 20 million. Was this additional funding supposed to be collected in FY 2022 and 2023, or you have it in 2024 right now?
I'm going to have to get back to you because what year and what million and how much we got, it's just, I don't have it in front of me, so I'll get back to you formally on that.
I would appreciate that. And I have asked this question in the past, so I'm a little concerned that the questions, the answers are not prepared for today, now that we're on budget. Because I have asked in the past, the billing, I have concerns about, should have been collected in 2022, 2022, 2023? Is it F year 24? How much revenue have we collected in the fiscal year 2025 since, Act 208 and the billing changed over from the state to the city?
Yeah, and I think just recently, and maybe you haven't got it yet, but we did send over a letter that encompassed the entire amount that we've received since we took over from the state. But that includes all the billing, all the subsidies, all the state money. So in total, it was somewhere about 118? Right now it's 102 million to date. But then that doesn't include, I think, some of the revenue for perhaps March, April, May, and June, which is still in this fiscal year.
Sorry, can you repeat that? So up to date fiscal year 2025, you said is about 120 million collected?
So that's when we finish this fiscal year in
a few months.
In June, we will have collected somewhere, I believe, around 114 million. And I sent it over in a letter, and forgive me, I don't have it in front of me. But part of the problem is, or not problem, but part of the thing that makes this a little difficult is we will bill for anywhere from $3 to $3.5 million this coming June in 2 months. But we won't collect that necessarily in this fiscal cycle. It'll come in July and August because there's always a delay in the billing. But I think moving forward, we're going to be collecting somewhere between $40 and $50 million a year, but we're estimating at about $45.5 million.
Okay, I wanted to double, because your revenue estimates, excluding the 3.5 million from the state, and you mentioned that your call volume is going to, it seems a little low, despite what you said, the call volume is increasing.
Yeah.
My estimates exceed 46 million, which you have stated, but can you just explain how the department determined the 42 million revenue projected for fiscal 26 if call volumes have gone up? How did you come up with that projection?
So, for the future projections, what we're looking at is what we're actually collecting, right now, which is about $3.1 million a month. We look forward to what the call volume increases will be. And then we look at the billing rate changes, which is 10% a year, knowing, though, that Medicaid and Medicare won't pay us anymore, and the commercial insurances that we have contracts with won't pay us anymore. So really that 10% affects mostly non-participating insurance companies, workman's comp, auto, no fault. So it's a little difficult to predict exactly how much of an increase that's going to be, but we do know it's going to be an increase. And same with the 5% in increased call volume, because it could be 3%, it could be 8%, there's some variability in there. And so that also is a little bit difficult to predict as far as increases. So we take that $3.1 million a month base, and then we just add to it, but the add is a bit of a guess.
So we don't have an accurate, you're saying all these factors,
Yeah.
It's not clear, the revenue projection.
Councilmember, so just to clarify a couple things real quick. So March 6th, Dr. Ireland sent over a letter to Chair Waters, and it was processed by the city clerk's office on March 25th. The numbers that you're asking for, and we don't have it by the year, but I can give you the total. So what it says in the letter that you folks received is the total HESD has received for ambulance billing from FY23 to FY25 as of this past February, $74,977,807.88. In addition, $14 million was collected from the state of Hawaii, and $13,356,748 was collected from ARPA funds. Thus, the total revenue collected since we've taken over our billing is $102,334,555.88. So as Dr. Ireland stated also that in the next 4 months to the end of this fiscal year, we'll be collecting about $12.4 million. And then to address your question earlier about the revenue, as we get older, we are paying right now, those of us that are under 65, 66, you're not on Medicare. So we get the full HMSA, UHA, HMA type insurance. Where an ambulance bill is $2,000, we're recouping about $1,000 off of that. When we get older at 65, you go to Medicare. Medicare just dropped that $1,000 recoup down to $500, or Medicaid for somebody else. So as we get older, our call volume increases because of our senior citizen population. So that's why we're not able to predict what the actual numbers is. Yes, the calls, we get an increase in call volume, we get an increase in 10% of the revenue, but actually we're losing revenue because as the silver tsunami, as they say, hits, we're actually losing more money because we're affecting more calls to the senior citizen population.
I understand that,
Okay.
but I still think that numbers can be calculated, and I'm just trying to understand how you got your projections.
Understood.
But thank you for clarifying, and we'll look into that letter that you mentioned. I had some follow-up questions, if that's okay, Vice Chair. I wanted to ask, based on the SLFRF funds, why that's being factored in when it's a completely separate pot of money unrelated to billing. This $13.5 million, where did it come from?
So the state promised us a transition, and
In 2022,
the whole, every
year, 3.5.
Yeah, they promised a transition. And when they promised us that, we just assumed it was all state money, but that's how they gave us the money. They gave us, it all came from the state, but we didn't know this at the time, but they took some of that from their own FRF allotment to pay us. So that's why we just differentiated that way, but that's all money that came in under the agreement of how they would do the transition. So it came from the state, but ultimately the state got it from the federal government, some of it.
And that 13.5, that's the one time. The 3.5 after that is?
They gave us, I think 9 point something 1 year and then 5.
Yeah, so that, was that 13, from my understanding, that wasn't promised in fiscal year 2024. Where did that come from?
No, those were, beyond that was the 3.5 million a year.
Okay, I'm trying to clarify. So according to Department Communication 706 from 2024, fiscal year 2024 revenue for ambulance service was around 72 million. However, the revenue for the ambulance service in the budget document is 5 million. Again, another discrepancy. I'm trying to understand between the documents that we're getting, the numbers don't make sense.
Okay, no problem. So let's clarify one thing at a time. 74 million, we're good on the fact that that's the revenue coming from the billing through the billing company. We're clear on that. Is that understandable? So that
I'm trying to understand everything. The numbers are all over the place, to be honest.
Understood.
Yeah.
74 million that's gotten in already, that's in the memo that we transmitted, that is from the billing revenue that we billed through insurance or self-pay. The 13.5, that's specific of the 4 years for the 3.5 million.
And that was promised back in what year?
From the Act 208 FY22, starting
22.
from that, yes.
But you have it in fiscal year 2024. So why is that when we don't see it?
It's total up, it's 3.5 for each year, not the 13.5 at one time. Then as Dr. Ireland pointed out, is the 8.9 and the 4.5, that money is from the SLRF.
So I hear what you're saying, but according to DC 706, you are factoring in in 2024 the 13.5 million, not just the 3.5.
Okay, we'll go get an outline back to you, Chair,
Okay.
Council Member, and then we'll make sure it clearly says where each one is coming from per year.
Okay. Because I want to know where that SLF, SLFR funds mentioned in the Communication 706
Understood.
are used to cover the uncollected billing, or is it used to, I'm wondering if it's used to cover uncollected billing, or is it used for core?
Understood. It's not for core, I can tell you that.
Okay, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, all for EMS, none for core. But that was part of the negotiation or discussion with the state, is they would have to cover a bridge when we knew that we would not be able to bill because of this procurement delays in getting the billing company and the Medicare number and that sort of thing. But it was, at the time that this law was enacted, I thought all the money was coming from the state, and in a way I didn't necessarily care where the money came from as long as we got it, but apparently at the state level, they took some of their reserves of FRF money and used it for this.
Okay, thank you, Director Designate.
But I think in discussing with you, I think what I will do, and I think this will make it clear for the public too, is maybe like a grid, and in this year we got this, and this year we got this, and then where everything came from, and just, because in my own head it's a little jumbled as well, so, and I look at this stuff, so I think that'll make it better for everybody.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Member Wire.
Thank you, Chair, or Vice Chair, and I'll be quick. I really just wanted to emphasize and support the comment by Councilmember Tupola and just sharing it with you, Dr. Arlen, because you're touching homelessness now. I've had this conversation with the homeless coordinator. That really, I think we do need to have more in the community services, right? I mean, if you just look at our Partners in Care outreach coordinator map, as it's dwindled, you know, we lost our outreach coordinator last year, I think it was. So now you have one provider that's covering from Ka'ena Point, all of the Leeward Coast and all of North Shore, down through Waihua, Milani, all of Ewa, Waipahu, Pearl City, one provider, right? And then one provider in Kolaloa that's also covering Councilmember Cordero's district, and then of course a provider that covers town around into parts of Kolapoko. And I just wanted to dispel the idea that focusing the resources in town is always the most efficient, because when you look at these cleanups, like at Belsey Land, hundreds of thousands of dollars probably that the city spent to pull out dozens of cars, you know, bring in all these trucks and having CSD and DCS and HPD and parks and DFM and all of the manpower. And then on top of that, when you're seeing, like I've seen the actual same person in Iwile, you know, walking down the street, Kamehameha Highway in front of McDonald's in Waiwa. And so just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, we're pouring a lot into homelessness and having conversations about the data we're putting together. Like, I think that's great because we want to have better data. But as we've talked about over the past 2 years, we know how to solve and make dents in this, visible, right, dents in this. We know that having the full spectrum of housing, and we know that we're lacking in respite and mental health, substance abuse, dual diagnosis treatment for particularly the males that the mayor's referred to, right, the hard to house folks. We know that we need, you know, non-congregate space at all steps of the process spread out, right? And I know you can't materialize solutions overnight, but I'm just thinking like a $10 to $20 million investment, we'd see a visible difference. Because obviously people are gonna fall out of that cycle, but it's like when Honolulu came to Waipahu, it worked. That's why they asked for it to come back, right? When it went to Whitmore, it worked. When HPD has the tools to do the nudging and then get folks into a low barrier place, it works. Doesn't have to be Honolulu, right? But having these spaces that are providing that spectrum of services will, I think, result in not just a visual improvement in rural communities, but also in town as well, because you're obviously wanting to support the folks that are doing really well. But when it comes to rural communities, I think we have to acknowledge, okay, we're looking for high-performing providers. Okay, we also have to look for folks that just need a little bit of support and capacity building. And then if we don't have that, the city has to step up and fill gaps because we need a minimum baseline. And this doesn't all fall on you, but just wanted to affirm the conversation we're having earlier. And it's the same thing we've been telling DFM, or DLM rather, DCS. And so appreciate the core project work that you're doing, but just do agree that we also need not just supporting you to get out there and provide the services, but also have the full spectrum of what's needed. And so just wanted to share that because that came to mind. And that's kind of an underlying frustration that I've had for the past couple of years. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I agree that, CORE can do a lot, but they can do a lot more if there's a landing space, appropriate landing space for these patients. And so, yeah, completely agree. And then the other thing, too, is when you have people who are resistant to voluntary assistance, if they are a danger to themselves, then we really need to push on more maybe the involuntary mechanisms we have to get people help.
Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, see none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next department. Honolulu Police Department, please come forward. All right, Chief Logan, welcome.
Morning. Chair DeSantos, Tam, Vice Chair Nishimoto, thank you for the opportunity. Council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to provide HPD's 2026 budget. I also want to thank my enormous finance division staff for all the work that they put into this budget, and of course our assistant chiefs behind and legal advisor and all the work they do to help get documents together, information together for all of you. With that, first slide. As you can see in the element of the first slide under FY 2026 at the bottom, the budget there is $390,467,000. That's a 6.5% increase from previous year. Of note, within that, you'll see that there's a 0.5% decrease in the salaries for FY 26, and that is due to having no formal union agreements for this current year, and so we keep the salaries at the current rate. As far as current expenses, you see a 26% increase in current expenses, and that is part is for fuel, but mostly for the 11 million increase is due to IT upgrades. There's 640,000 for a long-term scalable storage capability and upgrades to our Microsoft 365 for our computers, and another 420,000 for a leasing solution for our hardware, and that helps us instead of buying something, then it gets outdated, then I have to buy another one. This way we can get upgrades through this leasing program, which is more beneficial and better for our department. Lastly, there's upgrades in equipment at 1.8 million we're in year 2 of our TASER contract, and we're going to a new TASER 10 product that is much better and much safer for our officers. And we're in the process of fielding that. And then we have 2.8 million lastly, and that is a service upgrade to our weapon system that we carry or issued, which has a red dot sight and a flashlight mounted. And then also 800,000 for the training ammunition necessary to train all our officers as we transition from the current service revolver to the next one. In our equipment, as you can see, there's a 3,000% increase but this is a confluence of equipment projects that were coming over several years due to logistic issues as we came out of COVID, and so we're now catching up with all of those. So you'll see we have 7.5 million for our P25 radios, so we're changing out those radio systems. They've come to an end-of-life support, So the manufacturer is deleted those from their inventory, parts and maintenance contracts, so we have to get new radio systems, so that's in our budget. And then also, there's 6.3 million in our patrol vehicles, and that's also part of our significant budget issues, which is on the next slide. So we have a replacement cycle for our vehicles. We don't like to keep them longer than 10 years due to the mileage and the safety operations for our officers. So we're in the process, our vehicle maintenance unit, Michelle Oki, has a process for replacements of those vehicles. And so we're in the process of doing that. So 6.3 million is in our the budget for 63 vehicles. So by the time we purchase the vehicle, put all the equipment necessary in the vehicle, install the radios, it's about $100,000 per vehicle. So we're working towards all of that. And we have to change these vehicles out because with the newer vehicles, the officers are in the continuous use because we're a slight shortage due to this logistics trail that we've had. We have officers that are using vehicles for double shifts, so one shift gets off, the next shift comes on, and they take the same vehicles. So that causes issues and concerns, and that will increase our repair costs, so we're trying to reduce all of that. Also part of this equipment is a tow contract. Right now, the tow responsibilities fall under the customer services department, but in the future, we see that we may have to take over that operation, so this is part of that budget. And then lastly, we have $1 million in a firearms online application. This came out of a lawsuit that was filed against HPD for the long duration it took to file applications for either permit to acquire or license to carry. So for that incident, we've incorporated trying to buy a software that will provide a 24/7, 365 operational online application process for individuals. They will no longer have to come down to the station, wait in line, and then we can transfer those personnel who would be at the window helping individuals to do the background checks and speed up the process so that we can get applications out in 120 days. That doesn't mean people can't go up to the window if they need to, but they will work towards that. Next. As far as civilian vacancies, as you can see, we have 176 vacancies. We look to fill 19 by the end of this FY. And fill another 70 in 2026, and we have a robust strategy for recruiting our civilians, both at our Honolulu Community College with radio technician incorporation and vehicle maintenance. So trying to get individuals interested in coming to Honolulu Police Department to work in our telecommunications and our vehicle maintenance. And then also working with the schools and interested in communications, which is a number of vacancies we have in our communications division, to filling those, and then in our scientific investigative section to fill those vacancies as well with strategies to work in our universities for those individuals that are in the science degrees. Next slide. As far as our uniform vacancies, at 435, currently we have 110 recruits that are in the training pipeline as we speak. We look to have at the end of July or July 1st, we'll have 25 that will be entering into the full-time permanent process coming out of the training pipeline into the department where they count against our numbers. If there are 110 trainees that are in the recruit class, that doesn't count towards our hiring positions. And then we're going to run 4 academies a year. The first one starts in July of 2025, and that'll run through April of 2026. We're averaging between 25 and 30 recruits per class, so going with that number of 30. If we can get more that qualify to get into the class, we absolutely will. So we're looking at filling that at 120 throughout the year. If you look at our recruiting for our officers, once we have the hiring incentive bonus that's out there and working, But really what's working for us is family and friends is the #1 way we recruit. So those that are in the department or know someone in the department joins. The second one is social media. So advertising on social media is a great avenue for us to recruit. And the third is the hiring bonus. And then fourth and fifth, we work towards various career fairs and other events like that that are out there. As far as high schools, we're working with the Department of Education towards high school and those that are interested in becoming what we call cadets or police service officers as a way to get them in, come work for us on a limited term, and then transition into the recruit academy. So we're working with the various high schools in that, and we're doing that also with our civilian recruiting. Next slide, please. Non-holiday fund, as you can see, these are estimated hours. And non-holiday overtime is really those that patrol involved in a late arrest, where they normally would be off duty, but they have to stay late to write reports, process individuals. It's also for operational needs. So if a district has a vacancy in a beat and they want to fill that, they bring somebody in on overtime. So that's what that non-holiday overtime is. And lastly, it's for our what we call city co-sponsored events. So those many parades and other activities that are out there that we have to bring people in on overtime because the district can't fill it. The special duty's not filling that. So we have to bring people on overtime and fill those positions. So that's really what that non-holiday overtime fund is for. And it's not a major difference from previous years. Next slide, please. So the various breakup of the activities by the non-holiday overtime. If you look at number 2, the Office of the Police Chief, that went up by a little less than $100,000. And that's generally because we have used a couple of things. One is our virtual unit and our Makai Productions that producing videos for social media, also running 24/7 in conjunction with our PIO office to get information out to the media and to the public through social media on a 24/7 operation based on needs and of things that happen, such as maybe a call out with our SWAT team or something like that. We need to inform the public on what's going on. Also, our criminal intelligence unit and our professional standards office has to go out on after hours calls. So that's what's all that for. Next slide, please. The holiday overtime, as expected, it's same as last, or close to the same as last year, again, because there's no difference in the funding for pay raises in conjunction with collective bargaining. That's not happening, so we kept that at the same. Next slide. And the holiday overtime by activities, as you can see, patrol is by far the largest use of holiday overtime as the number of officers that are in our patrol division. There's 12 paid holidays a year, so the various officers get paid. Not every employee gets all 12 holidays paid, but and then there's 13 holidays when there's an election year. Revenue sources, next slide, please. As you know, we generate revenue from licenses and permits, and so these are our best guess based on previous years, anticipating what we believe is going to happen. And for the firearms and license to carry, that went up $150 from $10 from previous years. However, it's now a 4-year process for a license to carry, so it's a one-time cost for every 4 years. Charges to other services, fees for copy machines, alarm services, special duty fees, and then parking at the Alapai station. Fines and forfeitures, there's alarm fees and forfeiture of seized property. And then, of course, the police department miscellaneous funding, vacation accrual, refunds based on federal and state grants, and then auction sale for unclaimed property. And then, of course, our traffic enforcement with parking. Next slide, please. We have one contracted federal position. I know there was a question earlier for EMS. And if we lost federal funding, that's not going to be a significant issue. We'll be able to cover that position. And that's in our scientific investigative section, and they do DNA testing for us. Next slide, please. Federal funds. So there's a number of funds that come through the Honolulu Police Department to various agencies. The Drug Enforcement Agency provides funding to our narcotics vice in domestic cannabis eradication. The Department of Defense provides monies for Incident Response Center alert conferences and training, drone or UAS detection systems, and the Department of Transportation provides funding for impaired driving, seatbelt enforcement, pedestrian and bike outreach. And then we get a plethora of the Office of Justice programs on cyber crimes, de-escalation training, also stop violence against women. So these are the various things that federal funding comes in, and then we disperse that to the appropriate bureau for their execution. And then we'll also have the Office of National Drug Control Policy, which the HIDA is enforced through that. Next slide. CIP. For our CIP, we're looking at 2.1 million for the headquarters. That's a courtyard canopy to cover. Right now, we have significant rainfall. When there is significant rainfall, there's significant flooding within our building. To help reduce this, there's a project to cover the courtyard, which would reduce most of the second level flooding. And that would also help with waterproofing, piping, and drainage systems. So that's a project that's ongoing. And then there's also funding for our freight and parking lot elevator modernization. They're under contract, and there's every so many years they've got to be upgraded and meet the code. And so I think the last time, well, the building was built in 1992, so we need to ensure that that's effective and operating in a safe manner. Next slide. We also have Kalihi Police Station ventilation improvements that we're working on. That's $750,000. And then a fire alarm improvement project at Kapolei Police Station at 1.5 million, sorry. Last slide. I think that's it. All right. With that, I'll take your questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll start on this side. Member Tupola.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. Aloha, Chief. Good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Morning.
What is your first and foremost priority for your department?
I have three priorities for the police department. First one is recruiting. The second priority is reducing violent crime through focused on gun violence. And number three is a culture change within the department.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I would agree that, some departmental culture sometimes eats up strategy, so it's important.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree that decreasing crime is important. However, I think your first one is the most important. So in priority order, I would agree with you on the three. But I think number one deserves some really hard thought attention. When I got into the council, the vacancy rate was 320 officers. Now we're at 435. That year, HPD gave back 18 million. Last year, HPD gave back 50.1 million. That's how much has lapsed. So it's really difficult to look at the budget, seeing that there's increases, knowing that you guys are lapsing so much money, but the monies are specifically related to the salaries. So I hear what you're saying about recruiting. What has been the process or progression on retention bonuses? Because from what I understand, that's outside of the union and that's within HR in the city as well as HR within HPD.
So incentives I look at incentives for the whole department. So while I have the uniformed officers asking for an incentive to stay longer in the department, now there is built-in incentives by a person staying longer by getting longevity steps, pay raises that way, or getting promoted within the system to get a pay raise if that's the focus of their incentive. What I have to do is look at the department as a whole. So there's 2,100 total members of the Honolulu Police Department, of which 1,800 are uniform, and then another 500 are civilian. So how do I get that incentive to both sides? That's really what I'm looking at. My understanding is if I do that for the civilian employees that work for the Honolulu Police Department, because those positions are also part of the rest of the city, then it would impact the entire city. But we're still working through all of that, trying to figure out how to do this.
Yeah, respectfully, Chief, we need to stop looking at it and just do it. We've talked about retention bonuses for a while. We've talked about the fact that there's a civilian side and a uniform side. On the uniform side, the need is dire, right? Because these uniform officers are out there in the community, in the public, many of them covering areas by themselves or with few officers to back them up. So not only is it dangerous for the public, but it's dangerous for the officer. So it'd be nice to see some progress on that, or even built into the budget, or even a page saying, hey, this is a priority, so I'm putting this much aside for retention bonuses because this is how important it is to me. Over the past 5 years, to go from 320 to 435, that's crazy. We're just increasing every year, and I know that the initial, hiring bonuses were put in by SHOPO and you guys' department, and I appreciate that, but I think the bleed out is obvious, and I think every statement that's made to the commission or to us has to highlight that that's a priority. It has to be a priority. How many are we short for dispatch right now? Just dispatch.
Dispatch, I believe we are. I think it's around 30%. I think about 30 or 40 short.
Yeah, my concern in dispatch is that there are days when you guys are short on dispatch that no one answers. So it's concerning because that's also civilian side, right? Not the uniform side. So we need to figure out how we can incentivize that as well, whether or not it's going through that process, whether you decide that you're going to do 89-day contract. I have no idea, but there are moments when those dispatchers are also in the vacancies affecting the ability for officers to respond and for public to get their officer to respond. So I would like to see some, proposal or something maybe in Councilmember Okimoto's committee of what you guys are going to do for those two, specifically just retention bonuses for uniform officers and what are we going to do for dispatchers? I think we can try to, address everything else as it goes. And when you say it affects the whole city, yes, having those conversations affects the whole city, but you guys have $50 million to play with. So with $50 million, I think we could figure out a solution for both of those sides. And I think that it's about time that we get there. I appreciate your support of the school resource officers. I saw you speak at the police commission favorably about it. Yep. Just for clarification, the training for those officers is only a week, and it is national, and it is certified, and I'm glad we're doing that, but it's not a 2-year process, and I'm very grateful for your Assistant Chief, Aaron Takasaki-Young, for all the work he's done to push forward in it, and I thank your department for pursuing that, because we really need that at the school level. My next question is in regards to the tow contract. So in the past, as you stated, CSD had it, and unfortunately, CSD is behind in paying out the tow contract, but HPD had the tow contract before CSD, so this is not new. It's kind of bouncing back and forth, back and forth between you guys' two departments. The problem is paying out the tow contract. My issue with that is because I have to deal with abandoned cars and I have to figure out how to haul it myself. Officers definitely need the tow contract to be paid out, and it hasn't been. So CSD hasn't been, and then previously there were billing issues with HPD, which is why it went back to CSD. Who in your department is going to handle the tow contract, and how can you reassure us that that's going to be handled correctly?
So that's something we are starting to talk about. We are looking at our communications division and our finance division at how and who and with what are we going to do this with. We don't have the personnel on board to provide the suitability necessary for all of the requirements that's going to come with this, but it has to be done. It's something that's going to be required if it comes to HPD. So it's something we'll have to figure out. We're already working at it. We're discussing it. But we just got to finalize our plan and execute if and when necessary.
Yeah, thank you. I'll follow up with your office on that, as I do also think that that's a very important part of you guys' success and, of course, the patrol officer's success. My last question is, we are going to be taking a vote soon on hazard pay. When that vote is taken and it's approved, how long will the department be durating in order to make sure that the officers get their hazard pay?
My understanding is Shopo's already approved. The city, I believe, has approved the hazard pay. It's just a matter of when the city says execute, then Honolulu Police Department will start cutting the checks.
So do you have a date in mind, Chief? Because we'll be doing it next week, so I'm just saying because many officers, and I'm sure lots of other city employees are wondering about the hazard pay, but you're up here, so I just wanted to know this one.
In my mind, I think it's March of 26. I think it's the first. I'm not sure. I'm not the one working that. That is between the mayor's office and the unions, and so I think whatever date they come up with is the date that it will be executed. So
Yes,
I have no input into that date. All I do is execute the paychecks when I'm told to start paying.
Yeah, that's the one I'm worried about.
Yeah.
So I know the union part, I know the mayor's part. What I'm saying is that eventually HPD has to be the cut check people. So I'll follow up with you on that, Chief. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chair?
Thank you. I'd like to start with the $1 million being proposed for the online platform for concealed carry applications. Now, you just told us that you're going to be raising those fees to $150. You also anticipate bringing in $80,000 in firearm registration fees in the next year. So that comes out to 533 firearms that you anticipate registering. Now, if each of those is a 4-year term, you take the $1 million and divide that out, that's about $469 per firearm over the course of its 4 years to register. Is that, I guess, why does it cost $1 million to set up a portal for this?
My understanding, that's on the request for proposal we put out to look for vendors to provide this capability. That's the price or around that price quoted. And so we have to do this by the lawsuit that was applied to the city. And so that's what we're looking at. I was surprised that it cost $1 million for the software, but this is what we're looking at to purchase. And I didn't raise the fees to $150. That became part of the bill that the legislature passed last year.
Okay, and that's fine. I'm not complaining about the fees. I'm just concerned that it's $1 million for this portal. And it seems fairly expensive. Was there any thought given to doing it in-house through DIT?
We have looked at that. We are running a bunch of other projects right now. And so it's, how do I do one without the other? To us right now, I think the best expertise for us in this venue is to buy external to the department.
Okay. I also want to take a look at the Administrative Services Bureau. On page B216 of the budget document, in FY24, $17.7 million was spent on salaries. In FY25, $38.7 million was appropriated, and that's back down to 31.8 this year. The number of positions did not change at all. I mean, it went up by 1, and it's back down to 113. Yeah. What's that 200, or what's that $20.1 million difference?
That I'm not sure of, but I will get back to your office on that one.
It seems like a whole lot. And similarly, current expenses went from 7.6 million in FY24 to 13.5 million there. Again, we'd like some transparency on this, since this bureau had the largest change in costs. I want to turn now to the intergovernmental revenue part. The FY24 budget mentioned that HPD received about $4.2 million in intergovernmental revenue. There's none estimated for FY25 and none estimated for FY26. So when you receive this revenue, is that just icing on the cake for the department on top of the budget?
For the
intergovernmental revenue.
Yeah, the federal funds that are coming into the department, yes.
So that implies that those funds are being freed up elsewhere. Is that the case? You would be doing these programs anyway?
Not necessarily. Some of these funds are embedded into task forces and other things that we're on with our federal partners that has helped paying for that.
Okay.
Not necessarily all of it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that if we are anticipating outside revenue, that we're taking that into account, so that these funds that we give that are on top of, on top of that don't end up lapsing, or, we want to make sure that they're actually being used. Similarly, I recall that there was a program to provide $25,000 in incentive pay to recruits.
Yes.
According to the city's latest incentive report, there were 31 payouts of $2,500 and 17 payouts of $7,500. If you add that up, that's $205,000 in incentive pay payments thus far. Based on that, can you give us a fair assessment of how this program actually is going?
The program is working. Right now, our figures are $306,000 we paid out to the various, as they earn them and as they continue to come in. At some point in time, if we have, say, a number of vacancies that's filled, why we'd like to fill all 435, but I think a more problematic number is probably around 200, 250. If once we get to that point, we'll take a look at this program and see the extent of, is it still performing? What happens in a lot of organizations, and I've talked to major city chiefs from around the nation, you provide an incentive bonus like this and then it plateaus off. There's no new growth. It's a steady state growth. And so at some point we look at that and say, hey, is it an opportunity? Is it the reason people are coming in, or is it an added expense?
And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at with this question. We, I think, increased the salary amount in a previous year by something like $20 million, and understand this incentive program was part of it. It seems like based on what's in the incentive report, again, that's 31 payments of these very small amounts, it doesn't seem like it's having the intended effect, and maybe the department can convince me otherwise by providing information in writing.
Well, it's the number one, it's the third reason people are coming in, right? So first is family and friends, second is social media, and third is a bonus. So people are coming in, but really people are coming in because they want to serve and better their community, not necessarily for money, which is a good thing, I think. But it is an incentive now, and we will take a look at this and better assess the longevity of this program.
Yep. And then my last question is, you're asking for $6.3 million in new vehicles this year. What happens to the old vehicles at the end? Are they auctioned off? Are they sold? Are they just destroyed?
We use some for training purposes, but the majority go to auction, and they're auctioned off. If it's a total vehicle, then it gets destroyed.
Okay, because I don't note any revenues from auctions in the revenue report. So I just want to, I don't see any new auction revenue in here. So I just want to make sure that if you are auctioning these off, again, that becomes revenue that's not in the budget here. It's icing on the cake, which is great, but we also don't want to be giving out the whole pie here in a lean year. So, okay, thank you.
And just to go back, I think we're in the process of doing an auction online in this month or in the next month or two.
I noticed that. There's a number of surfboards and things on there.
Okay. Member Kiano?
Thank you. On the, Police Chief, on the federal funds current expense page, you have a listing of all the agencies. Can I ask if are these formula funds that trickle down to HPD, or are these funds that you compete for, or is it via the state? Because there's various ways for federal funds to funnel through. Do you know the answer to that?
I think it's all of the above. Some are direct funded from agencies, some are grant funded, requested through, and then some are
automatic. So automatic. Some you compete for, correct?
Yes.
What is the reason for the Department of Defense here? This slew of money, and there's a projected 2.06 million. What is that for?
That's in coordination with our Major Events Division, and we do a lot of work. We're also asking for, we got 1.5 million for a generator. The money's come through the Department of Defense as Homeland Security grants or other venues from FEMA and or agencies such as that. So the Department of Defense is the grant distributor, I guess, and so they distribute the federal funding under certain categories that we're asking for.
Okay, and then, because I have to tell you, given the challenges on others, I don't think they're going to be, unless you've heard, I don't think they're going to be touching these types of funds as much. So there's just, I think, more of likelihood of stability in some of these funding streams, especially out of the Department of Defense. And you have no projected amount for fiscal 28, yeah? For the Department of Defense.
Right, we'll find out in the next year or two what those projections are.
Okay, and then I just noticed that I'm assuming you have a projected out, when you look at the grand total, from 6 million for 25 and it goes down to 500. I'm assuming those numbers will change as the years progress, yeah?
Yes.
And, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. With regard to the priorities that you outlined earlier, I don't know of anyone who would disagree that the retention is a priority. So I did appreciate the discussion with Councilmember Tupula and yourself. I want to talk about 89-day hires because you and I have had a discussion of innovative ways to retain officers and the complexity of what would happen when you tamper with the state retirement system. Yeah. Do you concur that a robust 89-day hiring program might be the most cost-effective way to try to retain some officers upon retirement?
It's a way, yes it is, and we're going to use that pilot, that type of program towards our school resource officers as 89-day hires. Yes. With our reserve component, our reserve officers, and try to figure out, does the system work? How are they covered? Work out any bugs, and then as we transition towards what you're talking about, and that's filling patrol operations with 89-day hires. That's something we're discussing. We just have to work out all the collective bargaining and or human resources regulations and rules to ensure that the officer's covered if they get injured. How are they covered? Because an 89-day hire is technically may or may not be covered by the contract, may not be covered by the city. So is it a workers' comp issue? So we're working through all of that to make sure that when we do execute something like that, we're doing it and we're ensuring that the officer is taken care of in that situation.
And can I ask, do you have a estimate on how many people you have in that category?
I do not. I'd have to put out a feeler into the communities of our retirees or soon retirees or just retirees and our reserve officers and see who would be interested.
So number one, I just wanted to just say that I strongly support that. Number two, they need to be adequately compensated and proportionate to their talent, of course. They're recent retirees, right?
Yes.
And then I guess my only other question I might have is you and I talked about parking enforcement, which I feel HPD currently does that, and it takes away from other primary duties that I believe HPD should prioritize. And I do know that you have full discretionary authority to delegate that authority to another agency.
You're talking about parking meter enforcement?
Or parking violations in general.
Oh.
Yeah, HPD enforces parking violations, correct?
We do, yes.
So I guess because you have the authority to delegate, you know, I would like to follow up on our previous discussion if, in fact, the more appropriate agency might be the Department of Transportation Services, more to free up your officers to do other priorities of the agency. And, you know, maybe we can also talk about the towing contract in tandem with that. So I just wanted to let you know that I think it's something to lessen the load of those officers who have to do that and create a parking enforcement division within the Department of Transportation Services. We do not need legislation for that. You have the authority to delegate that, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention and potentially have a follow-up dialogue on that.
Thank you. Thanks for those insights. That sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Member Wire?
Thank you, Chair. Mahalo, Chief, for the presentation. Thank you for being here and all the work you're doing. I agree that, responding to our vacancy issues is top of mind, and I do think you share that, and so appreciate the work you're doing and here to support on anything we can do, including the retention bonuses and all the work that you're doing at the forefront. So with all that discussion already happening, I guess the only thing I was wondering, so community policing operations, that falls under patrol?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out, because I know I'm looking at the community affairs work as well. Is there a specific allocation for community policing in mind? I was trying to find in the budget, because I know we provisoed funds in last year, but then I wasn't sure what the department already had in mind in terms of what you anticipated using from the budget that already exists.
There's a budget for the Community Affairs Division, which is separate from, or they're indirectly linked, but community policing teams that are in our patrol, they're given a lot of money to the commander, and the commander distributes the money throughout his or her command at the appropriate levels that they want to fund the various entities.
Okay. Do you know what that amount you're anticipating for this particular budget for the amount
I don't have an exact number. That would vary by district as the commanders look at the requirements, opportunities, and probably what's going on in their communities, make that assessment, and in their judgment, appropriate the correct amount of funding for those CPT projects.
Okay. Mahalo, appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Okimoto?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Aloha, good morning, Chief.
Good morning.
I had a couple of questions also. And I know I'm looking at your budget. And I know you gave the breakdown for the equipment, and I understand that in the itemized, it's total, but just the numbers that you gave don't, just based on what you have here, they don't seem to match up. So I'm wondering if there's a better way to present that. Because you had the 13.8 million, which I had questions about why it was so high. You explained the radios, the vehicles, the tow contract, and the online firearms. Just for my numbers, that doesn't add up to the 13.8 million, it adds up to more. Yeah. So I'm not sure if there's a way to present that more clearly. Instead of lumping it all together.
I will look through the budget and I will get you that figure.
Okay.
Yes.
That would be really much appreciated. And I did have one question on, in your expenditures by program, you have that 16.681 million for support services. And so I went to the support services because I was curious as to what that was for this almost 16.7 million. And you have it under here for current expenses and equipment for character of expenditures. I was trying to read in the summary if there was an explanation for that. Could you explain what that is, almost 17 million for support services?
So support services handles our communications division. It handles various elements of vehicle maintenance, our telecommunications. Most of our civilian component of our department, not all of it, falls under the SSB or support services. And so the funding would be generated around those types of things that are required with the personnel that they have to do the work that they need to do.
And it has the equipment for 13.9 million, and then 2.8 for
right. So ITD would fall under them, so that would be part of that.
Sorry.
funding.
So what the 13.8 million is for what? I'm sorry.
IT and telecommunications, so radios,
Okay.
Computer systems, upgrades to our 911 capabilities and assets that are there.
This is separate from the P25 radios that you mentioned.
Right.
Different.
Is it?
Is that different? Is that a different?
Well, all of this
radio?
falls under that specialized, or the SSB, the Support Services Bureau.
Okay. I'll ask if I have follow-up questions. I'm trying to understand the numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, if I get the exact breakdown of what you're looking for, I can get you the
Okay.
figures on what that is.
Okay. Thank you. And I think my other questions were answered. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Waters.
Thank you. Good morning. It's still morning. Good morning, Chief.
Yeah.
You know, I think I certainly do, and I think I can speak for my colleagues. We support you and your department. Just trying to get creative on how we can fully fund all your needs. All great questions today, and most of them were were asked and answered already, but I'm just looking at your vacant positions. So if we have 435 uniformed police officer vacancies and 176 non-uniform employees, that amounts to 611 vacancies. We anticipate filling 234 based on your slides, which leaves 377 vacant that we probably won't be able to fill this year. Can we take the money from that and use that to pay the current expenses, equipment, and even I think you're probably being undercutting what you actually need for equipment, because I know we did not fund your request last year, but we could probably even bump up the equipment cost as well as paying for the non-holiday overtime with that vacancy savings.
Right.
Is that something you'd be open to?
I think that's a discussion with BFS, and let me cover some of the things though. With those vacancy provisos that we have, we get funded for steady state operations, and a lot of that is salary based, of course, but there's over and above operations at handle. So anything that has to do with overtime, as we budgeted for some of this, but some of it's unforeseen, right? So we have an operation such as like this past year in District 8, there was a significant crime increase related to guns and the younger generation in the Waianae, Nanakuli, Maile area. So we provided a lot of resources to that area to help, and we're not funded at that level, right? So all of that is out of Hyde and comes out of these proviso funds that we use to fund those special projects that are unforeseen at the time, but arise out of situations.
Nice.
So where is that next situation? I don't know yet. I got some ideas of things that are starting to bubble up, and so we would need money for that. But I think there is some leeway in there, and how do we look at the total vacancies and how we can fund some of the things that are in there.
Are you saying that you currently use the vacancy savings to fund other priorities, like you said?
Yeah, so my number 2 priority is to reduce violent crime, focused on gun crime, so we're working towards that. So I would use that money for those kinds of projects also.
You know, I notice every now and then you come to the council with permission to move money around, but that's typically between activities, right?
Right.
Do you need to come to council for permission to do, if you wanted to use salaries, say, for example, to pay for equipment?
I believe I have to, yes.
Yeah, which I haven't seen done before, but that might be an idea. But I'm thinking we just do it in the budget right now. Take some of that salary savings and put it towards equipment.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at right now with the $6.3 million for the vehicles, move that from salaries into equipment to pay for, because there wasn't funding in CIP where normally the vehicles are funded out of.
Right, yeah, and I think we put it in CIP, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. Okay. You mentioned earlier for online firearm application, did you say that the legislature determines the fees on that?
The state law that was passed this past year, I think Bill 52, no, I think that was the city version. The state version that recodified license to carry rules and the 134 section of firearms, put in there that one extended it from a 1-year license to carry permit to 4 years, made it statewide, and then also added in $150 for the cost of that permit instead of $10.
Can we raise the fee to cover some of this $1 million expense?
I think it's something to look at. I don't know if it's legally we can do that, but I think unless we have to go back to the legislature and ask them to do that.
Yeah, let's look into that, because if we can do it, because if we're allowed to charge a fee that's rationally related to the service provided. So if the service is $1 million, I think we could figure out how to raise that fee. The toll contract, I know it was kind of controversial, and we happened to stumble across it at one of the mayor's meetings where the toll company was overcharging. In this new toll contract, you think you'll be able to take care of that problem?
It's going to be a difficult transition. We don't have the personnel with the expertise to do that kind of work. I would prefer not to, but if we have to, we have to. It's an unfortunate operation that needs to happen. It's one of those things that we have to do. So how do we do that? How do we execute that as a city? If it falls on me, then we will take action and do that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, we're just lucky that this kid came to the town hall meeting and brought that to light. But I don't know how else we would track that. But maybe we can work together to figure that out. And then lastly, you know, since the 2024 New Year's shooting, you know, I kind of made a big deal about allowing the media access to the digital, what do you call that, scanners?
Yeah.
Any movement on that?
No, sir.
No? I'm still getting inquiries on my side. Just want to encourage you to possibly work with the media. I think we can trust them, like in Las Vegas, where you give them the key with a contract that says, hey, you cannot abuse this information. Any possibility of that happening?
It's something, you know, I've talked to federal agencies that have the regulations, right, that put these out. And it has to do with, you know, being HIJAS compliant, or CJIS compliant, sorry. And that is really the regulation that dictates who has access to that information. So those other, like Las Vegas, I believe they switch channels and then they switch back. And so they're doing certain information on certain channels, then they're not. We look at that as a safety issue. If I have an officer in a situation, is he gonna or she gonna know that, oh, I've got to switch my radio to process this or broadcast this information, so I don't put it on the open channel, I put it on the closed channel, and in the meantime a threat's happening. And so it distracts the officer. If it's an everyday kind of operation, that it would work. But in this environment where things happen, it's a very intense, dynamic situation. I think it would be difficult to expect an officer to do that. So we're going to have mistakes. And I would rather, in the lieu of safety, ensure that our officers are safe all the time, to not have to do that transition from one channel to another. So I understand why Las Vegas does that. But at the same time, we have to ensure that we're meeting the federal requirements of what the law states for these encrypted radios and how they operate.
Okay, maybe we can continue that discussion another time. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay, Member Toba?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Chief. Might as well join in on the fun, right? I hope that the upward trend in men and women wanting to serve their country would trickle down, where men and women might want to come and serve the city. So if you're watching, please consider serving.
Thank you for that.
The colleagues all asked really great questions. How many people have you recruited through the social media efforts?
The actual numbers?
Yeah. Would you?
That I'm not.
Is it working?
We know social media is number 2.
Yeah.
So family and friends is just over 50%. So I believe social media is high 20s, a percentage of. So we hire last year 110 recruits or 107 recruits. We retired 74 officers.
Yeah.
And so there is some upward mobility, but we're just in a lull where it's going to take time. Recruiting, I've done this for a number of years, not actually recruiting, but run organization where recruiting is a big issue. I know in my other life, we put a lot of resources toward recruiting, but we could afford to put those resources. In here, it's a little more difficult because those are people that we need in patrol, we need in investigations. So how do we take from one part of the department to push in another one? But we're 22% up in applications over the last year. And so that's progress that's moving forward. We've got a lot of strategies out there. We're working with our military, so those called a skill bridge program, so those that are coming off of active duty, whether through retirement or just their enlistment, they can come work with us for 6 months. DOD is covering that. They're paying allowances as they transition. They've got to pass the tests and do those other things, and then they can transition into the next academy or something else in the job market that offers for Honolulu Police Department. So we're working through all of that and then working on our institutions through the university. So we're out there recruiting, but we're also one of many other entities vying for the same number of individuals, about 100,000 that are in the recruiting market any given year. So how do we, get a portion of that? And then we have a little more stringent background to come into the police department, your moral compass and other things got to be a little more directly north. And so that background check is extremely, so that unfortunately disqualifies several people. So we're working towards all of that. I think in the next year or two, we'll see an upward trend of people starting to come. But we're not the only department. Like I said, when I go to major city chiefs, 99% of the police departments are 400, 500, 700, 1,000 short. And so we're about par for our size of the department. But I think we're seeing a growing trend across the nation, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you explaining that because it's good for people who are watching, understand the process. What do you think one of the reasons why people are not wanting to serve? If you've been doing this for a long time in recruitment, I just want to be transparent as much as we can and, trying to tell people that we still live in one of the safest cities in the United States, right? And there's a need. I think every district, if you had to look at the top three, would be public safety. Yeah. So you have any idea maybe why?
Well, I think there's a change in the employment of the future and what that means. And I think the best invention we've ever had is a cell phone, but it's also the worst invention we've had. One, it's more accidents probably or collisions on our highways. Unfortunately, people are getting addicted to all kinds of things online, falling for various criminal activity that's happening on cell phones. But so there's a whole e-commerce kind of employment that's generating a lot of interest in people wanting to see that. Yeah. So that's one that's taking away from people that want to come to work. For the Honolulu Police Department and really for first responders, you're serving from a purpose higher than yourself. So you're in a servant leader position that allows you, one, to take care of your community, to be a better person. And if that's the kind of people that you are, then this is the kind of job for you. But you have to come to work. It's not a work from home program. And so, but you're out there with your peers. You're out there in your communities. You're making a difference. And that's the kind of people we look to and attract. And I see a bigger growth out of our high schools and colleges looking towards law enforcement as a way to serve, that purpose higher than themselves, but also serving their communities. And it's not really about money, it's about the object. Service. Of course, they have bills to pay, they got homes, they got cars, and they need an income. And I know SHOPO and the other unions are working hard at helping the individuals with the pay aspect. But we can, we provide we provide up-to-date equipment, which is one of the things that's in this budget, to provide a quality of life for our officers. We're in a 313 schedule, so if you would like to come to work for 3 days a week and have 4 days off, then here's an opportunity to do that. I don't know if there's some interest in why people join for the 313 schedule, but I don't know the exact numbers of why. But it's an individual that really wants to serve their community and has a heart for just making everything better. And that's what attracts people to the police department.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm hoping that we can expand, like going to the schools. I would like to see, retired police officers in elementary schools, just as a role model, or, You know, if you look, my daughter has a nonprofit on anti-bullying. You know that it's normally the same kid that's disrupting that one class. And I think if we can find a way to get that kid in a nice environment where he can just talk, we realize that maybe it's, you know, having a positive role model like a retired police officer that might change the way this kid thinks, leading, you know, to maybe possibly one day becoming a police officer. So I like to see that expand. I also interested to seeing the numbers as far as retirees that would be interested in expanding.
Coming
So
on, yep.
thank you. Appreciate your
that.
answers.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
Okay, so one of your largest increases this year, or maybe the largest, is for equipment, correct?
For
so I basically, it's the 13.8 million.
yes,
So that's, when you kind of break it down, it's the 6.3 for the cars and the 7.5 for the radios, correct?
correct.
When you go back and look at what you guys have been budgeted for equipment in the past, it's always been very low.
Yes.
Or at least the past few years. It's been like 300,000. I think it might top off at like 1.2 in 2022. And I understand why you're saying it's a large increase this year, but is there a way to spread those costs out over several years instead of a huge spike in 1 year? It's my first question. And second is, if you can't spread it out, is there a predictable cycle where you say, okay, there's going to be, you know, almost nothing for equipment for the next few years after this, or how many years will that be? And then there'll be a large spike.
No, you're absolutely right. And your first question really answers the second part. And my answer is that this year, with the confluence of the vehicle purchases from 2021, 2023, 2024, all of that working in CIP, but those require other purchases. We also have motorcycles that we're purchasing also. And so this year, we've moved the money into equipment in the current year so that we could fund some of the things that weren't available in CIP funding to cover some of the vehicles, and that's why we're purchasing the 63.
So you
right, so that probably won't happen again, but I can't guarantee.
Your department made that decision to fund it in operating instead of CIP.
Right.
So you made that decision because CIP was full?
Right, there was, my understanding, there wasn't enough money in the CIP to fund this year's vehicles that we have now, or we are purchasing now, and so we moved that money into equipment to pay for that. So it goes back to Chair Waters'
Okay, and the way you make your budget is you have a cap on how much you can use for CIP?
Normally, I think we put the projects together and well, I think we're given an amount of money of what is available in CIP.
For your department?
For our department.
Okay.
But sometimes we're asking above ceiling
Okay.
for that, and sometimes we get approved, sometimes not. And so then we'll roll it into a future year.
So Budget and Finance gives you a cap of how much you can, or BFS gives you a cap on how much your CIP, how much you can spend in CIP?
Yes.
Okay, and this year it just so happens that you need these cars, and there are also other priorities in CIP that need to be funded.
Well, yes. So the radios, the cost of the radio item went up through the manufacturer. And so
can you fund the radios in CIP? Or is it just the cars?
I think that's a call by BFS on which funding we use.
Okay.
But I think it can be an equipment.
So both the radios and the cars could have been funded through CIP, but you used cash because you didn't have room in the ceiling.
A vehicle is a long-term 10-year thing.
Correct.
Radio's probably not so long.
Okay.
Because of the components within. So I think that's more of a near-term kind of project, which
So
better fits in equipment than CIP.
Yeah, the radios would probably be operating budget.
Yeah.
Cars would be CIP. Or I guess in the city, cars are CIP. In the state side, we usually don't fund it through CIP, but I think that's kind of what you do here. So you did it through cash because you didn't have room in the
Correct.
CIP budget.
Yeah.
Okay. And then to work off kind of what Chair was talking about, so the 6.3 million you have for cars, how many cars is that roughly?
63.
63 cars, okay. And then you said you'd auction off 63 cars that those replaced, correct?
I don't have those exact numbers, but you would assume that we would be losing 63 vehicles on the back end of the 300-plus vehicles that we have within our inventory, yes.
And then when you auction off the cars, what do you normally get for them? I mean, I have no idea what.
Yeah, neither do I. It depends on the people that ask. There might be a starting bid, but it also depends on the condition of the vehicle.
Right.
And people's.
Yeah, I mean, I understand these factors, but I'm just trying to figure out, okay, if you have 63 cars you're going to auction off and, I don't know, you get 10,000 a car, then that's revenue that's going to go into some budget. It wasn't clear which one.
Yeah.
But, okay. And then one other question. On your budget worksheets for patrol, under patrol, on page 452, under, I guess it's called object code or something, 3405, it's a repair and maintenance kind of bucket. I'm just not clear what that is, and the increase is from 45,000 last year to the ask this year is 250, roughly. What is that for? Okay, because when I tried to do the comparison with your sheets on, what you're spending over 50K on, the only thing I could kind of find was for this ACAMS maintenance, and I wasn't quite sure what ACAMS is. Oh, okay. Okay. When I Googled it, it came up with something else. Okay. All right. No further questions. Round two of questioning by members. Okay. Member Okamoto.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Still good morning, Chair. Chief, sorry. I had just a couple of follow-up questions. One of them was based on your revenue sheet here also, and I understand when I look at the fiscal year 2024, the actual was almost 12 million, and from my understanding, that was based on a lot of the grants or federal funding that the department got for specific programs. It went down this year, although we haven't yet got the actual for fiscal year 2025, and you have it kind of at the same amount for estimated revenue for 2026. But my question is, in looking at what we had in FY 2024, if those grants or federal funding, again, if that's cut in any way, what is the department's plan to address those shortages? Sorry.
Very good question, thank you. What we could do, right now I understand it, based on the budget that we have, we can absorb the federal funding necessary in the event that it gets cut at the national level before it comes to us. But I think the more we use the vacancy proviso funds and cut into that, then it would reduce that ability. But right now, I think we're good with what we have.
So the programs like the weed and seed and that would still continue based on you shuffling our funds to where we may possibly lose the federal funds.
Right. If I've got to make up for federal funding losses, then I'll use internal funding to and probably come before you to ask to move monies into current expenses to pay for those events.
Okay, because that's a big difference between the 11.9 million and the that was the actual versus the estimated that we have, which is about 5 million.
I have to look at the specifics, but yes.
Okay. And my last question, you did mention that your third priority, and thank you for meeting with me in my office as well. You mentioned that the culture of the department was your third, I believe, your third priority. And I was wanting to understand what types of measures you're taking based on training and addressing that type of concerns, because what happens, again, on the back end, which we've discussed before, is when things happen in the department, and unfortunately, officers make decisions that are not in the wisest. We and the city have to then we've done settlements.
Right.
And have to use taxpayer dollars to cover those settlements. So I wanted to know what you're planning right now. Maybe you did share this, but how are we addressing that so that we can, while addressing the culture, we're also not being responsible for the taxpayer dollars?
So thank you for that question. One of the things I just did on Friday was put out a video internally to the department, to all employees, on following what our vision statement is let us be revered in our mission to guard the people. And so really the word revered is a heartfelt attachment to the mission. The mission's been there for 92 years. As a matter of fact, it's probably been there for 200 years when the metropolitan policing concept was first created in England. And so, and that's really deter crime, apprehend criminals, retain civil order, and enforce the laws. So that mission set never changes, but your emotional attachment to the mission statement, as Councilmember Tolba brought up, how do we recruit, who we're looking for to recruit, it's extremely important. And so I look at that as one, being an individual leader of yourself as you come into the department, and then as a supervisor, as you rise up, is leading those individuals that are under your charge, and doing that with the vigor that you need to do as a leader to ensure that all of your officers and employees are doing what's provided within the rules, regulations, standards of conduct, and the roles and responsibilities of your position. So really that's what sets the tone of morale and the issue or concern we may have with the culture within the department. If everybody's doing their job appropriately, effectively, and everyone's sharing the workload, and then everyone's coming to work because the quality of life is good. And I think by and large we have that. There might be some entities here and there, for whatever reason, either don't want to pull their weight or are less than stellar like their other employees. So how do we coach, teach, mentor those individuals as leaders to get that everyone on the same bandwidth of operating in an efficient manner? So we've kind of altered our stripes class. So those are looking to be corporals and sergeants, or corporals as acting sergeants. And then we're going to focus on lieutenants as we continue to train sergeants. But that's the baseline of ensuring that you're now a leader, and how you lead and what your roles and responsibility are as a leader to the officers and the employees within your charge. It will set the tone for the rest of the department. So leadership is extremely important, all the way up from me and all the way back down. And so we all got to lead by example. We got to lead with a purpose, and we got to lead to make decisions. May not be, liked by everyone, but at the end of the day, the decision is made, and we all move in that direction and accomplish the mission. So those are the things in the culture that I'm trying to work at, and that's where we're heading in the future. So the video was kind of more of here's our vision. We as individuals got to make sure we're all doing our part. And when an individual doesn't and does something way outside the box that puts a stain on the uniform or the badge or the brand of Honolulu Police Department, then we all suffer from that. So we have to ensure that as individuals and as leaders that we can make sure our individuals are not getting that far down the road where they would make a mistake such as that or a decision. So we got to be in constant communication with and knowledge of all of our employees, who they are and how they come to work, how they act, and ensure that they're not just physically fit and ready to go for the job, but also mentally fit to be there for that very dynamic situation that may happen, and then your life or your partner's lives are in danger. So you always got to be prepared in this job. So that's really what I'm looking for.
Oh, and thank you for sharing. I appreciate the efforts that have been made. And as been said by my colleagues, I do appreciate all that you guys are doing. I was just curious, and maybe you feel inclined to answer now, but maybe not in if you'd rather do this in private, that's fine as well. I was curious, when you're dealing with changing the culture, is this more concerns with those who have been in the department for a long time, or the new ones coming in? Because we know that we deal with different generations of workforce when we have the newer versus those who have been in the department for years or decades.
It's really both. It's what's the culture of the older generation of officers, the senior officers that have been in the department for a while, that know and been through a lot, and now are able to pass that information on to the younger recruits that are coming in, the new officers, as they transition into the watches and come to work in the organization. So that transference of information and really morale and culture at that level is extremely important. Again, leadership plays a significant role in how that can impact and affect those that are just coming in and those that have been around for quite a while.
Thank you. And just to close, because we have talked about recruitment for most of this hearing, or in depth, and you mentioned at the top, recruiting method has been family and friends. So I'm guessing that if the morale is high or well, then those who are in the department will then be able to attract others who they know. And if it's the opposite, then that would be the case as well. The opposite would be the result. So hopefully, as you're doing this, it can continue to incentivize those who are not here, not in the department, to join you based on the experiences that those who are in the department are able to experience. So thank you for your efforts.
No, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Chair Waters, very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly. Thank you. No questions for Chief. Thank you, Chief. But I just was handed a few minutes ago from my staff a letter dated yesterday from Winton Park, Director of Office of Council Services, which I'll be filing today, and I highly recommend we all take a look at it. It's called The Status of City Finances for 2025. The report presents details about the status of the operating budget from the prior fiscal year and the status of capital projects for the most recent ended appropriation period. And if you look at this, it actually talks about by department, by activity, how much was appropriated, how much was adjusted, how much was expended, and how much was lapsed. It does point out that the largest lapse in the entire city was from patrol at the police department at $14.9 million. But I just want to point that out. We'll be filing it today, that it's a super helpful tool for all of us to take a look at. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Chief.
No, thank you for the opportunity. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for your insights and things we can look at to improve in the future.
Okay, great. We're going to move on to Honolulu Fire Department. All right, Chief Hall, go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, good morning. Chair Dos Santos Stam, Vice Chair Nishimoto, council members. I'm Kalani Hall, Fire Chief of the Honolulu Fire Department, and I want to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present our fiscal year 26 budget. On this first slide, you'll see our FY25 appropriation and our proposed and our percent changes. For our salaries, most of the changes has to do with an adjustment. I think when I met with all of the council members, I kind of explained over the years that when the collective bargaining across the boards happened, over the last several agreements, that we were only giving the across the boards in our regular pay line item. And the spike that you see for that $312,000 has to do more with, it's more of a spike year. Next year, we're probably going to go back down, but it was to purchase a CAD server for our dispatch, fire dispatch, and also to purchase a pump simulator for our training bureau. Currently, right now, when we do pump training, we end up using one of our apparatuses. So getting a pump simulator is not, you're not going to have the whole DOT type of requirements to keep the pump simulator. We can leave the apparatuses out in the field and for our other training uses. So that pump simulator would kind of help the wear and tear off on our apparatuses. Next slide. Again, here is an allocation of that changes by activity. Our administration, bulk of it has to do with adding a new position of new battalion chief in our Ad Services Bureau. Over the past several years, we've taken a lot more as far as from recruitment and promotion away from HR, so we need more staff to go ahead and process those things, and it has allowed us to kind of help stay ahead and help manage our vacancies and keep it at a manageable rate. As we go down our communication center, a lot has to do with purchasing that CAD equipment. Our prevention is just more to stay up with, again, those CBA increases, that adjustments that we talked about. And an increase to our uniform allowances on the CBA. Moving down to our mechanic shop, a lot has to do with overtime to address keeping and maintaining our fleet. The aging vehicles, cost of the parts has increased, so a lot of the overtime, we're going to need our mechanics to go. We're 24/7 operations, so a lot of times whenever the apparatuses break down, we need them to respond as well. Training Research Bureau remaining relatively flat. Our radio shop has an increase, and it was more having to do with that radio replacement, as I discussed earlier. Our fire operations is where you see the largest deviation. It's a $2.9 million, and it has a lot to do with, again, like I said, across the boards weren't be given in the premium pay line items, and it's more reflecting of what historically what we spend on overtime in our fire operations. And again, slight adjustment to our planning and development, and you can see our fire commission and radio system is flat. Next slide, please. Again, the summary, FY25 appropriation at $156 million, and I proposed at $159 for a total change of $3.8 million. The special funds project, that $110,000 is due to, we had a community relations specialist that was being funded on contract basically, and now we're bringing it over on a permanent basis now, and that is why that expense went from 0 to 110. Next slide. Right now we have no federal funds budgeted for FY26. We do, however, apply for grants and receive grants on an annual basis. Next slide. Our budget issues, as I stated earlier, for the increase in our administrative services is 1 battalion chief, and there's a salary for that battalion chief, and also that community relations specialist that I spoke about, that it went transition from a personal services contract to a permanent FTE. Next slide. So as you show, our position count changed by 2, went up from 1,189 to 191. That reflects the adding of those 2 positions. Our vacancies, our civilian vacancies, as of January 31st, we're at 11 positions. And we look to fill 10 by the end of the fiscal year. We are actually currently, right after this report was due after January 31st, we actually filled 3 positions. So we are actually down to 8 remaining vacancies in our civilian pool. Next slide. I want to highlight, and actually this slide needs to be corrected. From the report that we had from Budget and Fiscal, our vacancy stated 141, but our actual is at 110. And what that doesn't include is our current recruits that sit in our recruit classes. Right now, we have 64 individuals because they actually sit in ghost positions until they transition after their first year. So our actual vacancy counts is that, with that 64 recruits is actually we're down to 46. And we look to hire 40 to 50 people this coming July. So we basically, as the vacancies occur, we're already processing that upcoming recruit class in July. So we're pretty much, like I said, managing our vacancies the best we can. Next slide. Focusing on now our non-holiday overtime. You can see a appropriation of 10.7 and our proposed is increased to 14. Like I said, the reason is largely due to across the boards and historically, even when you go back to FY 17-16, our expenditures were around the $10 million mark. And so, like I said, when our premium pay line items, including non-holiday overtime, wasn't really funded to be able to support where that expenses were being charged to, which is non-holiday overtime. So we had to utilize some of the salary savings in our vacancies to kind of stay in the black overall. So this is more of an indicative amount of what we require to maintain our services. Next slide. And here is that overtime summary by activity. In our administration, that 60,000 increase is again for the CBA across the boards adjustment, as well as like I said, we're doing a lot more work in our recruitment and promotional. We took a lot of that process away from HR. So a lot of our clerical staff to have to process all of these things have had an increase in our overtime. Our communication center, it's just like our fire operations is 24/7. A lot of overtime goes for staffing and as well as helping support our training activities that we're doing. Right now, we like to use our dispatch personnel to participate in our training events when we do our multi-company drill so they can simulate the actual fire dispatch. So they do that on an off-duty basis to assist with our training. Moving down our mechanic shop, the overtime is, like I mentioned before, to no more after hours for our mechanics to come in and maintain our vehicles. Again, and the largest part has to do with non-holiday overtime and everything in our fire operations. So a lot, like I said, is connected to our across the boards not being given and our rank for rank overtime. Over the years, we haven't been getting 100% funding, so that allotment needed to be increased. So that 7.150 is kind of in direct alignment with what our FY 25 projection is looking at. So I think it's in alignment with what our actual true needs are. Next slide. Moving on to our revenues. License and permits, as you can see, was relatively, our estimated versus our actual is relatively flat. It's a slight increase. I think when we were looking at these initial estimates, if you look at column 3 for our license and permits, back when we did the study in September, it was 665,000. But when we're looking at our recent projections, it's pretty much more in alignment with what the estimated of FY 25 will be. So, like I said, when we had to run the numbers in the past, it was a little high, but we're now more in alignment with what our estimated is. Our intergovernmental revenue, you can notice that there's 1.324 million in our FY24 actuals, and the reason for that drop, look in our estimation, that we don't quantify all of the grants. That's all the grants that actually come in that we apply for and then we get awarded. So the actuals, that's the reason why for that huge deviation that you see. And that 260,000 has to do with funding the State Fire Council position. So that's more of a constant that we can rely on. And that's why we put the estimate as that's the only one we really can quantify. Charges for services, that has to do with our plans review. as building permits go in, we have our fire code specialists go in and look at it and check the plans. You actually see an estimated, we had it at 1.151 million, and that was due to working with DPP, and we thought that they're trying to make everything more efficient using their new program to process the permits. So we estimated actually high because we thought that we were going to have more permits and everything goes through. So instead of having a spike, it was more of a hump. So it was more spread out. So we're not going to see that high actual true estimate in FY25. And that's why we brought our estimate down to FY26, down back more towards the $1.1 million range. Miscellaneous revenue, you also see a drop from the FY24 actual to the estimated, and as well as our FY26 request. And this is largely due to, we get donations that come into the department. We have reimbursements for fuel for HPD and also for EMS. So they consider that as they use our fuel, that's where that resources come in. And also, when we have people that transfer over from other departments, they bring over their vacation pay and their sick leave and everything. So that's where the bulk of it comes from. Next slide. Moving over to our capital budget. We have in our bulk fund $4.5 million for these particular to maintain our facilities. Next slide is the breakdown and allocation of that $4.5 million. We have 2 generator replacement projects. We have a window and roof project at our Kaimuki Fire Station, above ground storage tank conversion for our fuel at Waiau Fire Station, and our driveway reconstruction for the Makakilo Station. So some of these projects that we are prioritizing this year has a lot to do with our disaster preparedness, our generators at the Waianae and Nanakuli fire stations as we were going through the public safety shutoff plans and finding out how the network systems work, that we found out that it was important for our Nanakuli and Waianae fire stations to have power. Otherwise, it would impact all of our network systems for the entire city moving down that west coast. So that's why that's some of the projects that we want to take care of and improve. And also our Kaimuki Fire Station is identified as one of our primary locations. So if and when we have a disaster and power goes out, that we need to harden that Kaimuki Fire Station, because that's one of the critical areas where we can daisy chain our radio communications around the island. Next slide, and then we have some unanticipated needs that we have $2 million appropriated. A lot of times these projects that I had on the previous page come in and the costs go up, and we just need this line item for anticipated just to cover those costs. And also if there's any other additional repairs that needs to be made to one of our 50 facilities, there is a fund in there to maintain it and address the issues. Next slide, please. Okay, part of our CIP, we have our Pearl City and Waialua Fire Station relocation, and this is for our planning and develop. Right now, we are currently working to secure the land at Pearl City Fire Station for the new Pearl City Fire Station. We have a meeting with the DDC Land Division and the current property owners of where we want to buy on the 20th of this month. So we're very hopeful that we can kind of move that forward, purchase the land so we can go ahead and move forward with the planning and the design for that FY26 funding. And also, same as with our Waialua Fire Station, we're working with the DDC Land Division. We're doing some soil sampling for the environmental, and once we get that information back, then we can proceed and move forward with that land acquisition also, to then go ahead and use these funds that is appropriated for our planning and design. Next slide, please. For our CIP fire equipment, you can see that we have a lot of items to purchase, a large ticket item, 6 engines, 2 aerials, a rescue boat, 2 mid-size sport utility vehicles. Sorry, there's a correction on the next line. 1 full-size SUV and a utility terrain vehicle. So in the past, we were reliant on actually getting some CDBG funds as well as CIP was used to replace our equipment. But as post-COVID, the market changed and our build times for our apparatuses went from 365 days to now it's several years. So the CDBG funding can no longer be used to help purchase our apparatus. So moving forward, this is the type of support that we would need to maintain our fleet. And we try and come up with a replacement plan for everything from our apparatuses to our equipment to try and maintain a flat budget as possible as we go year to year. So moving forward, this is the type of request as far as quantities for our apparatus to maintain our fleet to be able to service the community. And that is the end of our presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with this end of the room, if there's any brief questions. Chair? Member Okimoto.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good morning, Chief Ha'o.
Morning.
I want to first thank you. I really enjoyed reading the report. And I think the way that it was presented and written really helped me out as it spoke to me. So thank you for how detailed you were and your visual report. To me, it was, like I said, easier to read and pick out where my questions are going to stem from. And thank you for clarifying some of the questions that I probably had off the top of my head. I may ask some follow-ups based on what you said, though. So you mentioned I noticed the 2 full-time positions that are being requested. One of them was a battalion chief, which you mentioned, and the other was, actually it's on here, for community relations.
Yes.
So in your description, which I appreciate, you mentioned what those positions would be doing. I was wondering who has been fulfilling those responsibilities listed currently in the department?
So when we started taking on more and we have again, to manage all of the vacancies, we had to come up with a recruitment and a promotional plan for our staff. And we had to take on more of the responsibilities on HR so we can do it in a timely manner that we can control. So we can do our recruitment and our promotional. We created a promotional cycle every year, so everything is more standardized now. And to do that and to coordinate all of that efforts about when the transfers are going to take place and all of this recruitment, creating a new promotional platform on how we promote our personnel, we've changed everything to make sure that it's standardized. And just to manage that portion of the personnel moving in, coming in, going out, and creating the assessments needed for our promotions, we needed somebody dedicated to kind of be that comptroller, to work that liaison, to work and manage with all of our staff, to actually be that person to direct our personnel section on what needs to be done and when.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
But right now, how is it being done? Because
we had to take one of our battalion chiefs from our training to be special assigned in that section for now. So one of my chiefs sitting right next to me is actually the one that is performing that task.
Been doing that.
Correct.
The salary seemed, I'm not going to lie, when I saw the salary, I thought, oh, because that seemed kind of high to me. I don't know just the character of the job, but I read the description and that kind of stuck out to me. But I also was curious as to, if somebody's there in that position, somebody's been fulfilling the task right now. So what you're planning on doing is just, there's a body there and you're just going to make it a permanent full-time position?
Correct.
Okay, and when has this been when did it become a factor? You're saying the recruitment and retention became an issue. So when was it necessary to have another person fill this responsibility to cover the
It started when we again started taking more of the promotional process away from HR.
When was that?
I would say maybe like a year and a half ago. I think we started taking over.
From HR?
Yes, from HR, especially on the promotional side. Again, we needed to be in control of the timeline because, again, our recruitment plan and our promotional plan, it's all calendared out. We have a system and we needed to be able to execute when we needed to execute, which means when we have a written examination, we cannot be waiting for the results months down the line. And we've gotten it so efficient that before we would have to wait, let's say 12 weeks to get the results from the written examination from our promotion, to now we're giving the results to our personnel within 6 days. So just making sure that every step of the process, from written examination to whatever, creating an assessment, to the interview, and having that whole process, being able to manage that timeline and coordinate all of that efforts, and as well as create the curriculum that's the office's responsibility, and that's what Chief Jones has been doing so far. Yeah.
Thank you. And in relation to the other position, I read about that also, and I was wondering, is there a person currently in that place? Is it the same thing where somebody's there?
It's actually it's a current, but she has been on the contract for 5+ years. So now we're working on making that position permanent. So on slide number 6, you would see that in the second column, it's a transition from a 1.0 personal services contract to an actual FTE. So there was actually someone in that position, but now it's part of the budget, which will be funded by that special fund that we have, that plans review fund that we have. That's where that monies will be coming out of.
I saw that, and I saw it under in fire prevention, and I was curious, because the description sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds similar to what a PIO would do. So I'm wondering if, are the responsibilities duplicative? Are they overlapping?
No, they're quite different. So the community specialist has to do a lot more with the outreach, with events, dealing with our public outreach with the schools or any type of events that we may have, fire prevention events. That's more of their realm. The PIO is more on, we have two. We have one for the operational side and one that is more for our office, as far as the administration, to deal with more like the media side, the non-operational types of issues that come up.
So the social media that's listed here, that's social media based on just reaching out to the schools and the community.
Correct.
And this person that's there already, so they've been doing this job.
They've been doing this job for the last
and you're just
5+
transferring
years.
it to full-time.
You're just making a full-time that it will be funded by that special fund.
And can you remind me why that is again? Why we're transitioning from that to this?
I think we've always had a need for the public specialist, and we've been just doing a contract, and it was the right thing to do, is to transfer this person that has been with us 5+ years, and that's something that we would want to continue having that position into the future, to make it a permanent position instead of a contract.
Okay, and unlike the other position, this is not somebody who's a firefighter in the department. This is outside.
No, it's a civilian.
So in the future, would it be open to a person in the department? Could they fill it like how you have other positions?
No, I think it should remain as a civilian staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Couple more questions. Thank you. I noticed that in your, I think this is your department budget, I saw some increases I was curious about. So in the fire commission, it goes from $4,000 to $22,000. And I was wondering what that was for. It went from actual $4,000 in 2024, appropriated in this year, $22,000. I was wondering what the jump in that was for, and it's carrying over, I guess, in 2026, similar.
You guys get the info. I can follow up with that information. So we'll look into it and get that answer for you.
Thank you. And then for, I believe there are several items of the equipment. I know I went up from the 770,000 to the 1.1 million. I'm curious because I know you have it itemized here, but was that increase? What was that increase for? Is that where the trucks are, or what kind of equipment is included in that? That's this. I'm looking at the overall. I didn't go back into each section and see if the increase was there.
Is that are you referring to slide number 2? And we go from with our equipment from 771,000 to 1.084.
Is that a number 2 you said?
Yes, that was the increase was due largely to getting that data server for our FCC. That was 225,000. And also for a pump simulator, which is 125,000. So
Okay.
that's the increases for those two items.
Where in the budget is the estimated for fire trucks?
It's in the back on slide number, 18. It's at the end of the packet. On our capital improvement, fire equipment. Actually, it's the second to the last page in the packet that you probably received.
Do you know where that would equate to in here, under which
Under the
program it would be, or
under the CIP section.
the trucks? That's where you have the trucks, okay.
Yes. So on the slide, it actually shows the cost per unit. Our engines right now, we are estimating at 1.9 per our
Got it, okay.
engine apparatus. And our aerial apparatus is at 2.8.
Okay, thank you for pointing me in the right direction. I did have a couple more. Maybe I'll ask one now and then I'll go back to round two, but. Okay. Oh, you're getting back to the Fire Commission. I know you mentioned in one of your slides the reimbursements. You said
Yes.
from other departments. So I know in the mechanic shop, and you did mention that some of the overtime was connected to that. But I did read that we are repairing and maintaining HPD's fleet of equipment for diesel vehicles above 10,000 pounds. I was wondering, what does this fleet consist of? How many vehicles?
It's not very much. It's their big command vehicle. It's not like we're doing a lot. So can you clarify that? 17. 17 apparatuses.
And this is not something that we get reimbursed for. Is this included in that part where you said the funds where we might get reimbursed from other departments? That's not, are we getting compensated for when we do that for?
Yes, we are.
We are?
Yep.
Okay. Do you know about how much?
I can get that information to you after.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Vice Chair. I have questions for second round, possibly.
Member Wire.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say mahalo for the update on the Wailua Fire Station. And appreciate all the work that went into this budget and all the work that you and the department are doing every day. So mahalo. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. Member Kia'aina, any questions? No. Okay, great. Member Tupola.
Thank you so much. Aloha, Chief. Thank you for your presentation. I would agree that it was very clear, and I just have a few follow-ups. And one of them was in regards to, you guys have a city radio system, so inside the larger book, not this presentation, it kind of delineated that the radio shop monitors communication for city departments and divisions. But then also, I guess HPD has a communications division with a PSAP, which is the largest public safety answering point for 911 calls. Is there any connection between those two, or they answer your calls, they give it to you, or how does this all work?
So with the 911, can you repeat the question?
So you guys have the city radio system as part of your budget, right?
Yes.
You have 4 permanent FTEs for it. You talk about the need for,
I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. We lost quorum, so I'm going to appoint Chair Waters to the committee temporarily. Sorry to bother.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. So my question was, you have listed the city radio system and the 4 full-time positions, and then it talks about how this is a coordination between many divisions, and then also HPD has kind of their own support services, and then DEM does as well. Can you just explain to me what your city radio system does versus the other
Our
guy?
city radio system helps take care of the radios, portable radios, and radio systems for other city departments other than HPD.
Oh, so everyone but HPD?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
And when you say radio systems, you mean like walkie-talkies, or you mean inside a car, or what do you mean?
A little bit of both, yeah. Both.
Oh, and you
Yes.
guys manage all of that?
Yes.
Yeah, because it says you guys do it for DFM and other people.
Correct.
Interesting. And then also, I don't know if you have the answer for this, but you know, I know that Councilmember Okimoto brought up that the commission went from whatever 8,000 to 22,000, but nonetheless, the police commission is at 886,000 for the commission for their total budget. Is it because you guys have less meetings, or?
No, we have monthly meetings. Yeah.
Okay, I'll figure that out because
Okay.
that's pretty different. And I would assume the fire commission, the police commission do very similar things, unless I'm mistaken.
We're actually funded at 22,000, but the secretary only worked the $4,000 amount. Yeah, it's a half FTE for that position.
Okay, I'll look into that. Thank you, Chief. Thank you,
welcome.
Chair.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Member Okimoto, second round.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you again, Chief Hao. I think I just have two follow-up questions. And one was, in your proposed budget, was it factored in for hazard pay? And if so,
It was not, and as Chief Logan also stated, that is usually the MD has been handling that. So I'm not sure. I think HFD and OTS was going to be handled next fiscal, in fiscal year 26. So I don't have any updates, and the hazard pay is not in our budget.
okay, thank you. And last follow-up question, I saw on your fire prevention page that you have the fireworks license and permits program, and you mentioned that, I believe, in your presentation, and you have, again, thank you so much. I can't tell you, I really did appreciate reading how thorough your report was. But it talks about the program working to control import, storage, wholesale, and retail of fireworks in the city. I was wondering how closely this program, or the people in this program, are working with our state DLE, because
Well,
you're
we're
trying to do the same thing. But I didn't realize actually that you were addressing the importing, storage, all the same things that they're trying to attack as well.
Right, so all the licensing for the people bringing it in or going to have fireworks shows, we give the permits out. But we have been working with the state to ensure that we can have a database that is not siloed by county, because that's one of the issues that we're finding. And we're working with DLE closely on how this new legislation is going to be coming up through legislature now, on how we deal with fireworks in general. So
Okay.
we do work with them.
Do you know about how much we generate with the permits that are legally processed?
According to this, our actuals for FY24 was at 583,000.
And based on, I know that we have a projected, but I'm just curious because we know that there's a lot of it that's not, that they're done illegally. So in working with the DLE, well, that's okay. I will wait till the legislation comes through, and
Okay.
I'll have future conversations with you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Chief Hao. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, see none. It's 12:10. My preference is to power through ocean safety before lunch, unless there's substantial resistance to that. I don't see any, so let's move on to ocean safety.
Thank you.
And then we will be taking a lunch break after ocean safety. Okay, thanks for being here. I know you're going to get through your presentation quickly, so
Yes,
we
I'll
can
be
get
as
to questions.
quickly as I can.
Okay.
Good morning, Vice Chair and City Council members. My name is Kurt Lager. I'm the Director for the Honolulu Ocean Safety Department. I'm excited to be here today to present you our budget for the newly created Ocean Safety Department. I first just want to acknowledge and say thank you to a few people. Gary Chan, our administrative specialist, helped me very much with putting this presentation together and the numbers, and then our two assistant chiefs. Charlie Oliveri and Adam Lerner, who have been very supportive in this new department. With that, I'll get into the operations budget. Some highlights for fiscal year 26. First off, I'd like to just mention that we are nearing completion of our first facility ever being built for ocean safety, and it's a 107-year history that's going to support the Kailua and Lanikai community. We're very excited for that to be done and move into hopefully sometime this summer. We are planning on increasing our lifeguard service with lifeguard towers and we're evaluating hotspots. Hotspots are areas of high activity that has history of rescues and injuries. So there are several hotspots around the island, but I would like to increase our coverage through more lifeguard towers. We also are looking at expansion of our current mobile responders. They respond to all areas where we do not have lifeguard towers. This will help our coverage for dawn to dusk or our extended hours mandate. And then lastly, I have plans to continue and hopefully grow our junior lifeguard program, which I feel is a very important program that supports our community and the keiki. Breaking down our budget by category, we are 86% salaries. That's the majority of our budget. The other 14% is pretty evenly divided between our current expense and equipment. So overall, going from fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 26, we're looking at an increase of about 17% or about $4.1 million. 9% increase in salaries or about $1.9 million. Our salaries is largely going to be due to added positions to help support the creation of our department, administrative positions and water safety officer positions. Our current expense is going up 41.5% or about $611,000. More than half of this is going to be in minor repairs and maintenance for our current facilities that need a lot of attention. So that would be stuff such as repairs to walls, replace doors, air conditioning units, and stuff like that. The remainder of that expenses will also be to help repairs on some of our equipment, such as our jet skis, ATVs, rescue boards, and that type of stuff. Our biggest increase percentage-wise is our equipment at 647% or about $1.5 million. The reason for this large increase is in fiscal year 25, we did not purchase or were not funded for any lifeguard towers. We are now going to be funded to buy 6 new lifeguard towers for a total of about $1.02 million total in towers. We also bought 0 lifeguard trucks or vehicles in fiscal year 25. We have funding added for 4 trucks, roughly about $75,000 a truck or $300,000 total. And then we're going to increase our jet skis for a total of 12 jet skis, or about $288,000 total for our jet skis. And then some other items under equipment will be solar panel PA systems that we mount on our lifeguard towers to make public addresses at the beaches in a storage container. Overtime by object code, an increase of $204,000 or 34.5% for our non-holiday overtime. This is mainly used for responding to rescues or medical incidents at the end of the day that go beyond our normal operating hours or needing to bring our guards in overtime. But it also supports our daily staffing where there are vacancies to maintain our an operational level of staffing. Holiday overtime, per collective bargaining, our lifeguards work 365 7 days a week and work on holidays, so an increase of $45,000 to help compensate that. So a total of 25% increase, or about $1.2 million for this year's overtime budget. From fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 26, we're going to add a total of 10 full-time positions. And then contract, we're looking at increasing 23 contract positions, so giving us a total of 33 positions. Our contract positions are our entry-level lifeguards. They come in on a contract. They typically are used to backfill vacancies or vacant positions due to work comp injuries, approved vacation, or sick leave. And then over time, we transition those contracts into the vacant full-time positions as quickly as possible. Prior to February 1st of 2025, we were able to fill 16 positions, exhausting our our civil service hire list. So that left us with 23 vacancies at the February 1st snapshot. Majority of those are all water safety officers 1 and 2, or about an 8% vacancy rate. Some of those vacancies are funded but not yet created, so we are finalizing position descriptions to get those positions created. We've already started the planning process and plan on filling all those positions in fiscal year 26. And we are moving, and yeah, we anticipate filling all those vacancies. And lastly, our fiscal 2026 CIP budget and program summary. We have one project for our ocean safety stations, Kailua substation that is being built, and our Waianae substation. We have money in planning, design, construction, and inspection totaling of $1.4 million to finish construction and improvements on those buildings. And then in the CIP budget, you can find that on Bill 23 on page 8 and BFS Department Communications number 143 on page 33. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. Starting on this end, Member Tupola.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Aloha, Chief Logger. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. What an exciting time to do the very first budget presentation from the new Ocean Safety Department.
Absolutely,
Let's
yes.
go. I'm like excited. This is very exciting. Okay, I guess my first question is in regards to specifically the Waianae substation. Are you talking about the one that's already over there by the fire station?
Yeah, that's the one that's located behind the fire station.
So what are you going to do over there?
We were planning
Demolish it?
on,
Nah, just kidding.
well, we were planning on renovating it, but due to restrictions for coastal erosion setback and flood zones, we're going to have to build on the same property, but it's going to have to move further inland. So it will be a brand new property, and then I'm not sure exactly what will happen to the current building. And
Yeah, it's
it might
really
be a historical
old.
building, so but
It's really old.
it is old.
So you're going to move it more inland, you're saying?
Yeah, on that same property, but just set back there's a requirement where it has to be set so many feet back from the coastline.
Yeah, and I am grateful that you guys are on this spree of new towers. I want to say that 13-year gap, and then starting it August 2023, and Kahe just kind of like started it, like just a relook at kind of what we need. So I'm glad, because I think it was overdue. Lastly, there was a time, and I don't know if it's been changed, but where the lifeguards were doing like paper pencil reports at the end. Are you guys still doing that?
We are, but we have already started transitioning. We started with Hanama Bay because it's a smaller work group, but we are moving to a digital platform on tablets to capture all of our data and have real-time statistics and incident reports at our disposal.
Is that something that DIT is helping you with, or you guys have budget to fund it?
I've spoke to DIT with it. We're using a third party right now, same as the neighboring counties and agencies on the mainland.
Would that be like a laptop that each tower is going to have, or a
It's like
iPad?
an iPad
Okay.
or a tablet, and it's just touchscreen.
Good. That'd be great if we get away from paper and pencil.
It's been an issue where we know it takes forever, pen to paper, and to get all our data. So it's way overdue.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the commission possibly being established maybe April or May, and then I really think we got to look at like a overall strategic plan for the department. But I know that we're kind of still just getting our footing. So thank you for everything. Good job.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Member Kiaina.
First off, I'd like to announce a gold star to our newest department for being one of the only departments to actually have a page prior to your vacancies for putting your permanent amount of employees as well as the contract. And as I said yesterday, it's so important for us, right? So anyway, gold star for that. And of course, I'm very, very grateful as you guys are working on the completion for the new facility in Kailua. I'm assuming, is that separate from the substation?
It is separate from our substation, yeah.
Okay, can you elaborate then? Let me know where we are on the facility. Is it a budgeted, is that budgeting complete? So what is the time frame for the completion of the facility? And then give me an idea of what's going on with the substation.
So for the Kailua facility, it looks like this summer. I can confirm with you the exact estimated date. It seems
Okay.
to keep moving a little bit,
Yeah.
but we do anticipate it being done this summer. And then for the substation for District 2, the windward side, it's located at Cocoa Head District Park, and
Oh,
we
okay.
plan on remaining there as well.
Okay, got it. Well, first of all, I'm very, very excited. I was there when you, of course, had the blessing. There were some newcomers who just arrived in the state who decided to pitch up some red tents over there. And I told our community policing team if they could just show them some aloha and kindly tell them to leave the area. We
Thank
would
you for that.
appreciate it
Yeah.
because we were starting this off. So, okay, I'm looking forward to the completion and just wishing you all the best as you guys are starting your new department. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember.
Thank you, Member Wire.
Thank you, Chair. And echo the congratulations and mahalo to you and your entire team for
Thank you.
just your leadership right now. I'll be brief, and just to kind of go to the 6 towers, could you kind of explain where those are going to go? I know there's probably some replacement and then some new spots.
Yeah, so we're going to continue replacing old towers that are just need to be replaced due to various different reasons. We are looking at several locations, particularly in your district, that warrants a new lifeguard tower due to increase in activity and incidents in those locations.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then the 12 jet skis, some of those are replacements and some of those are new.
Yeah, most of
Rescue?
them will be replacements.
Okay.
Yeah, we just, after so many hours, we try to rotate out the jet skis.
Okay. So in terms of looking at additional rescue teams, that's ongoing and maybe future budgets?
Yeah, I want to, right now in Hauula, we have a jet ski unit that's only working weekends and holidays. I'd like to see that be 7 days a week to service that side of the island. And then part of our reorg that we're looking at is to have a rescue unit. And similar to how fire rescue works, I would like to have some rescue jet ski units that would service the hours outside of what our normal operating hours are, which are 8 in the morning till 6:30 p.m. So that we could truly cover dawn to dusk.
Okay. Really appreciate that. And as I said, appreciate all the work you're doing.
no problem.
Mahalo. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Member Okimoto.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Hello, Chief Lager. Thank you so much for being here with us. As my colleagues have said, we are happy to see you out here, and hopefully this isn't as daunting as it appeared to be, hypothetically. My questions actually were in tandem with Councilmember Wire. I was curious about the 6 towers, and you mentioned that you're replacing some, but also there's some new ones. I wanted to know how that's determined. How does the department determine where they will put new towers? And my questioning is because I know when it comes to other departments, like, for example, when it comes to roads, there's lots of studies that have to be done. It takes months for them to study and research incidents, traffic accidents, and all of that. So is that the same thing that's used here, or how are you deciding where these towers, the new ones, will be
it's based off
built?
historical data, incidents and rescues in those areas.
And over what time period is that data collected or considered?
I don't have a specific time period. We typically look back 5 years.
5 years, okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. And again, with the new towers, and Councilmember Wire might have asked this, but maybe I didn't fully hear the answer. So when you're thinking about filling these positions, you have the position, are they currently there, or you will need to then recruit new
We would need
personnel?
to add positions wherever
You
we
need to
put
add
a new lifeguard
positions.
tower. Yeah. And with these contracts and positions that we're getting and the additional water safety officers, we're on our way to doing that.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Chair Agua.
Thank you. Just briefly, I note that the Police Commission has 8 positions. The Fire, I think, has only 0.5. Do you have anything in your budget for the Water Safety Commission?
Yeah, so it's going to be a contract position, a half-time position. I believe it's titled an Office Safety Assistant. It's about $23,700.
Is that enough? Is that sufficient? Would you like to increase that to a full-time position?
I don't know the answer to that exactly. I'm not sure how involved with the commission and how that all looks right now. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Okay, members, any other questions? He said no. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'd like to thank all the first responders that testified today. We really appreciate all their work. Members, it is almost 12:30. Why don't we recess until 1:15?
Can we go to 1:30, Vice Chair?
Sure. So we'll recess till 1:30 on Chair's request. Recess subject to the call of the Chair.